If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 226, Abomination's Death. Charles transformed into a green lightning, stepping on the air to reach Abomination. At this moment, he closed his Byakugan, but could still clearly see the sinister smile on Abomination's face. Charles aimed a powerful punch at Abomination's chest. Meteor Fist. Abomination was sent flying back even faster than before, crashing through several buildings and cars along the way. Due to the downward force of Charles's punch, Abomination was eventually struck into the ground, creating a deep trench. A massive fist imprint appeared on Abomination's chest, but he hadn't died yet. He was gasping for air. Charles, without giving Abomination a chance to recover, appeared in front of him. 11 rapid punches struck Abomination's heart area, the first 10 being incredibly fast, and the final one, a fully charged, powerful strike. It produced a tremendous explosion, creating a shockwave and a white sonic boom. Splurt! Charles didn't send Abomination flying further or deeper this time. Instead, he directly pierced through Abomination's chest, causing a massive explosion in his heart. With the right arm that had penetrated Abomination's chest withdrawn, Abomination tilted his head, and his body lost support, sliding into the deep trench created by the impact. This marked the complete end of Blonsky, who had transformed into Abomination. Looking at Abomination's lifeless body on the ground, Charles glanced at the helicopter above and Hulk being tormented by Tsunade. With a wave of his hand, Charles directly stored Abomination's corpse in his storage space. This was a valuable item, whether for future research by Orochimaru or for Scorpion to use as a combat puppet. It should not fall into the hands of the military or other factions. At this moment, General Ross was dumbfounded, unable to comprehend what had just happened. He hadn't seen a thing, only a green streak. An Abomination was sent flying. Then, after a deafening explosion, Abomination fell, and his body disappeared, leaving Charles surrounded by green flames. After a brief moment of confusion, Ross immediately realized that Abomination had lost, and not only that, but he was also dead. Even his body had vanished. Betty, who had been watching the entire scene, rushed over to her father. "Father, help Bruce." Betty had been observing the situation from the other side of the helicopter's window, witnessing the brutal beating that Bruce Banner had endured from Tsunade. Upon hearing his daughter's plea, Ross snapped back to attention. Abomination is lost, and he couldn't afford to lose Hulk as well, otherwise, it would be a significant loss for him. "What's the situation with Hulk?" Betty quickly explained what she saw, pulling Ross to look at the other side. At this moment, Tsunade appeared indifferent, effortlessly overpowering Hulk with her powerful punches. Under the influence of chakra-enhanced strength, Tsunade's power surpassed that of the current Hulk. Additionally, Hulk, only proficient in brute force, lacked any knowledge of martial arts and was completely outmatched. Hulk hadn't even touched a corner of Tsunade's clothing, he was being toyed with, seemingly like a child being played with. Although Hulk had a freakish physique, strong recovery abilities, resistance to beatings, and his body had not suffered significant damage, the mental trauma was not small. Especially at this moment, Hulk was like a helpless baby, someone who had been wreaking havoc since birth, but had never been disciplined like this. At this point, Tsunade was curious about the limits of Hulk's recovery and chose not to directly strike vital areas. Just as Hulk was feeling bitter, Tsunade moved in with a high kick, sending Hulk airborne with a powerful force to his abdomen. In the moment of being airborne, Hulk witnessed Abomination's death and disappearance. Although Hulk's will at this moment was not mature, Bruce Banner's request and the idea of defeating Abomination were transmitted to him. Seeing that his task had been completed by someone else, Hulk also understood. Upon landing, he immediately turned and ran. Seeing the massive figure in front of her trying to escape, Tsunade was about to chase, but at this moment, Charles instantly appeared in front of her. Although Hulk's speed was not slow and he had jumped onto a tall building in the blink of an eye, it was nothing in Tsunade's eyes. In fact, in her view, this speed was even a bit slow. "Now that you've dealt with your side, there's no need for me to hold back on this guy." Watching Charles resolve the battle, Tsunade had no intention of playing any longer. She didn't want to be surpassed by Charles. Just as Tsunade was about to move to pursue, a hand grabbed her arm, stopping her, and she didn't pull out her arm. Tsunade looked at Charles with surprise, noticing that he was still releasing the 8 inner gates, and revealed a hint of surprise seeing his strength. The amount of chakra was somewhat comparable to hers. "No need to chase." Actually, he came to help. Hearing Charles's words, Tsunade instantly realized that she had made a big mistake and felt a bit embarrassed. However, her tone was unfriendly as she said, "Since you knew he wasn't an enemy, why didn't you remind me?" After saying that, she threw a punch at Charles's chest. Boom! The punch made a muffled sound. Tsunade's punch was not light, but Charles released his chakra, turning it into a substantial defense, which absorbed the huge force of the blow. However, it was still uncomfortable. After punching Charles, she saw that Charles was still grabbing her arm and didn't let go. She instantly said with a cruel smile on her face, when are you planning to let go of my arm?" Feeling Tsunade's terrifying killing intent, Charles's face showed a wry smile, and he immediately let go of her hand. I forgot. Tsunade gave Charles a disdainful look, not saying much. At this moment, Charles sneakily moved his hand behind his back, thinking to himself, "I have to admit, Tsunade's skin is really good. Holding her arm, it feels different from holding someone else's." Just as Charles was lost in random thoughts, Hulk had already jumped onto the building and ran towards the distance. On the other side, General Ross's troops rushed over, and even tanks were brought onto the streets. Chapter 227, Tense Situation. Betty, who witnessed Hulk's escape, breathed a sigh of relief. He ran away, which meant temporary safety. This way, he wouldn't be beaten to death by the opponent, and he wouldn't be captured by her father, making it the best choice in her eyes. General Ross, on the other hand, observed Hulk's escape and Charles and Tsunade remaining at the scene, lost in thought. Although Ross still hadn't obtained information about the identity of the two, thinking about the recently killed Blonsky and his disappeared body, he could make a rough guess. Most importantly, in Ross's eyes, their existence was more important and valuable than Hulk. Hulk, this big guy, could be found slowly. After all, he couldn't get lost on Earth. But the two individuals in front of him. Just as Ross was about to give orders, a communications officer walked over with a tablet. "General, this is the information from the Pentagon. Our troops have arrived at the intersection of 71 Forest Hills Avenue, Indiana, Queens." Ross took the tablet and looked at the recorded information on it, sliding through the pages. On it was a social security photo of Charles Doyle. Charles Doyle. Age, 21. Address, 71 Forest Hills Avenue, Charles Agency, Indiana, Queens. Second largest individual shareholder of Stark Industries, founder of the Heart to Heart Charity Fund, good friend of Tony Stark. Suspected to be the mysterious figure present during the battle between Iron Man and Ironmonger. Apart from these details, there were some registration details from Charles Doyle's Social Security, along with speculations. As for Charles's assassin career and the identity of the Elder High Table, Jarvis had already erased them completely. During that time, Charles was, for the military, an inconspicuous figure, and there was no intelligence gathering or investigation. All this information started to be collected only after Charles became a major shareholder in Stark Industries. Looking at the meager information on the tablet, Ross was speechless. Whether this information was fake or not, it presented Charles as a shareholder of Stark Industries, the initiator of a charity fund, and a friend of Tony. Even if it was true, Charles Doyle's growth trajectory information was almost non-existent, with no records of educational information. However, in Ross's view, one thing could be confirmed: Charles Doyle was not simple. He was a capitalist with the support of Stark Industries and Tony, not someone like Banner that he could easily arrest. Ross shook his head and put down the tablet. Then he spoke, "Prepare to land." The battle at the scene had already ended, and the arriving soldiers had surrounded Forest Hills Avenue. As the helicopter landed, General Ross walked out and approached Charles and Tsunade. Looking at the handsome man and beautiful woman in front of him, General Ross smiled, "Thank you, Mr. Charles, and the beautiful lady, for lending a helping hand." While Ross was speaking, he extended both hands, seemingly sincerely expressing his gratitude. Not refusing General Ross's goodwill, Charles simply shook hands with him. Betty, who had come out of the helicopter with Ross, had her gaze fixed on Tsunade. Betty wasn't angry with Tsunade for beating up Banner, instead, she was full of curiosity about her. After the handshake, General Ross changed the subject and directly said, "Mr. Charles, thank you for your help. However, that monster just now is military property. We hope you can return it to us." At this point, A large number of soldiers had assembled behind General Ross, and tanks and armored vehicles had arrived on 71st Avenue, seemingly surrounding Charles Doyle and Tsunade. Charles waved his hands, as if to say he had nothing in his hands. "General, I don't understand what you're talking about. Are you saying that the yellow monster that just disappeared is an experimental product of your military?" At this moment, a sergeant approached General Ross. "General, please follow me." The sergeant led Ross to the side of an armored vehicle and took out a military tablet, saying something that made Ross frown slightly. Although the sergeant's voice was low, since the distance between the two sides wasn't far, Charles could hear everything clearly. "General, our soldiers didn't capture how Blonsky disappeared, and the street surveillance was destroyed during the previous battle, leaving no evidence." Hearing the sergeant's words, a smile appeared on Charles's face. However, Ross didn't pay attention to the sergeant's words. Evidence was something left for the judges, it wasn't a necessity for him. "Charles Doyle, I know your identity, and I know you're a major shareholder in Stark Industries, also a capitalist. But military property is not something you can take possession of. Now, immediately hand over Blonsky's body." With General Ross's stern reprimand, the soldiers around raised their weapons, aiming at Charles and Tsunade. The atmosphere that was once light-hearted turned tense in an instant. Tsunade, who had been waiting for Charles to handle things, frowned instantly, becoming impatient. These guys with low strength dared to point weapons at her. Tsunade lifted one leg and stomped the ground. Boom! The already devastated street instantly cracked open a wide gap. The entire street trembled as if experiencing an earthquake. The soldiers on the scene were swayed by the sudden shaking. The crack on the street instantly expanded, spreading dozens of meters and directly reaching under the armored vehicle beside General Ross, swallowing it up. Fortunately, the depth of the crack wasn't significant, only about 7 or 8 meters deep. However, it directly caused the armored vehicle, along with the soldiers inside, to fall in disarray. Some soldiers near the crack had broken numerous bones. Tsunade, looking at the embarrassed Ross, shouted, "Charles said he didn't take it. If he says he didn't, then he didn't. What are you trying to force here? Do you think you're stronger than the monster just now, or do you think we're good people who won't get angry?" Tsunade didn't care about these soldiers and the military at all, whether it was these weak soldiers or armored vehicles and tanks, they weren't enough for her to bother with. In Tsunade's eyes, these things were like paper toys, not worth mentioning. Chapter 228, Notice. Hello everyone, hope you're all in good health. I wanted to give you a heads up that I'll be away on a trip with my friends until Sunday, and unfortunately, I won't have my laptop with me. As a result, I won't be able to upload any new chapters during this period. I kindly ask for your thoughts and prayers, not just for a safe trip but also for a journey filled with joy, meaningful experiences and positive connections. Likewise, I extend my prayers to all of you, and I look forward to catching up with you when I return. Wishing you all the best in the meantime. Take care. Comment. 12 Comment. Vote. Chapter 229, Chapter 228, Nick Fury arrives. Seeing Tsunade's domineering words, Charles also put away the smile on his face. Although the 8 inner gates had been lifted, his own strength was not to be underestimated. Charles's gaze turned icy as he looked at Ross, a chilling killing intent emanating from him, mixed with a vast amount of chakra. The temperature on the scene dropped sharply, becoming icy. The soldiers holding their guns suddenly felt as if an invisible hand was gripping their throats, making breathing difficult. Even Ross, accustomed to battles and storms, had cold sweat forming on his forehead. He secretly speculated, how many people did he have to kill to have such a strong killing intent? There was something wrong with the information that he got, definitely. But considering the massive destruction caused today, with the entire block practically demolished, but he hadn't captured Bruce Banner. If he also failed to get Blonsky's corpse, when he returned to the Pentagon, even if he was a military general, even with the power of his family, he wouldn't be able to bear that responsibility. He might even have to take off his military uniform. Considering the situation he faced, Ross had no choice but to confront Charles, even if the latter was stronger than Banner. As for researching the strength of Charles and others, whether it relied on a special serum or some other substance, that was something to deal with later. What he needed to do now was get through the difficulties he faced and resolve this experimental accident. Under the pressure of the formidable killing intent, Ross waved to his soldiers, signaling them not to act recklessly. Ross knew that soldiers, under such intimidating killing intent, might have a reflexive response, instinctively pulling the trigger. Of course, the main reason was that Ross believed the weapons his soldiers had couldn't cause harm to Charles. Otherwise, why bother negotiating? Just capture him. He showed no mercy to Banner, his daughter's boyfriend, let alone this stranger Charles Doyle. But Ross was restrained by his own limitations. Then, with a determined expression, he spoke, "Charles, you are a powerful individual and also a capitalist. But military items cannot afford any loss. If you have other demands, you can propose them, and we can sit down and talk. The military is willing to pay a certain price for your assistance. What do you think?" Seeing that Ross wanted to compromise, offering a way out with a certain cost to obtain Blonsky's body, Charles was not very willing. Honestly, the military definitely had good things, but the useful ones might not necessarily be in their hands. If Ross could bring the Tesseract, Charles would be very happy, but thinking with common sense, even if Ross was willing, Nick Fury would not agree. Nick Fury couldn't command General Ross, and General Ross couldn't command Nick Fury. To exaggerate a bit, S.H.I.E.L.D. listened to the World Security Council, and they could completely ignore the military. The two were not part of the same department or unit. Moreover, considering the nature of Nick Fury, the Security Council was his money bag. If they had money, the Security Council has value. If not, who are you? Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to misappropriate such a large amount of funds to build safe houses globally. After confirming that he couldn't get what he wanted, Charles still refused, saying, "General Ross, I didn't take that yellow monster just now. Maybe he has an accomplice who rescued him. If you believe I took him, provide evidence. Where could I hide someone with such a large size? There was no place in the deep pit we fought in just now. Did I put him in my pocket?" Seeing Charles Doyle refusing to admit, Ross's face turned unpleasant. Without Blonsky's corpse for research, he couldn't justify it to his superiors. Just as Ross was in a dilemma, the roar of a jet plane came from the sky, right above Ross and the others. Ross looked up to see a S.H.I.E.L.D. Quinjet hovering above them. Then the jet slowly descended to a relatively flat surface, but it didn't come to a complete stop. Instead, it hovered 1 meter above the ground. Just a single jet was enough to showcase that S.H.I.E.L.D. surpassed Ross by more than one level in weapon sector. As the Quinjet's door opened, Nick Fury, along with Hill and a team of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, walked out. Seeing the additional team of personnel, Tsunade turned her head to Charles Doyle, asking who they were. Charles, noticing this, explained the existence of S.H.I.E.L.D. to Tsunade. It was a spy organization similar to Root, possessing a large number of agents, spies, and armed forces. It was more powerful, had more personnel, and sometimes even more insane than Root. Listening to Charles's explanation, Tsunade narrowed her eyes slightly, looking at Nick Fury and others with an unfriendly expression. At this point, Nick Fury, who arrived on the battlefield, walked straight to General Ross and presented an authorized document from the Pentagon. He spoke, "General Ross, the matter concerning Charles and others is now under the complete jurisdiction of S.H.I.E.L.D. I would appreciate it if you could lead your troops to evacuate immediately." Ross took the document from Nick Fury, gazing at him with a complex and strange expression. At that moment, a communications soldier ran up to him. "General, a call from the Pentagon." Ignoring Nick Fury, Ross followed the communications soldier to the side, answering the call from the Pentagon. After a brief conversation, Ross hung up the phone and walked back. Then he said, "Nick Fury, I can hand this over to you, but my soldier Blonsky's body, you must retrieve them for me afterward." Having said that, Ross didn't give Nick Fury a chance to respond and shouted, "Retreat." After these words, Ross, along with a few soldiers and his daughter, boarded a helicopter and took off, leaving the scene. The other soldiers, under Ross's command, also began a complete retreat. The soldiers in the deep pit were rescued and taken away, and the armored vehicle was temporarily left at the site. Nick Fury had anticipated Ross's withdrawal. After all, on the way here, he had contacted his old superior, Secretary Pierce of the World Security Council, and had him help obtain authorization from the Pentagon. As for Ross's mention of Blonsky before leaving, Nick Fury was still somewhat puzzled, but he didn't pay too much attention. The body of a soldier was something he could easily obtain, he could even provide a few energy cubes to solve it effortlessly. Chapter 229, I'm a professional, unless I can't resist. As the battle concluded, Irika, who had been aiding civilians, finished his rescue work. He returned to Charles's agency and brought the personnel from the basement back to their positions. On the other side, with Ross and his men retreating, Nick Fury approached Charles along with Hill. He took out a business card and said, "I'm Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Charles accepted Nick Fury's business card, comparing it to the one Coulson had given him earlier. Aside from the information, the material was no different. "Hello, is there something you need?" Charles asked. Nick Fury glanced around the environment and said, "This isn't the best place to talk. Let's go to your agency." Charles nodded and didn't refuse. He led Nick Fury, along with Tsunade and others, back to the agency. Charles and Tsunade controlled the area during their battle. So, the agency building was undamaged, otherwise the previous reconstruction effort that had just been completed would have gone to waste. Entering Charles's agency, all the staff, including the gatekeeper, receptionist, security, and service personnel, were back at their posts. Nick Fury observed everything with curiosity. Despite the commotion outside, the people inside didn't flee or panic, showcasing Charles's effective leadership. Returning to the agency, Tsunade, not interested in dealing with people like Nick Fury, greeted Charles and went straight back to her room. Charles, on the other hand, brought Nick Fury to the meeting room. In the meeting room, Charles sat on the sofa with Nick Fury and Hill. In the meeting room, there was no tea or drinks brought by Irika, whether intentionally by Charles or due to neglect. Sitting on the sofa in the meeting room, Charles looked at the two individuals in front of him and spoke slowly, "I wonder, Agent Fury, what brings you here this time? And why isn't Agent Coulson with you?" Upon hearing Charles's words, Nick Fury, who had seen Charles Doyle countless times in the files, but was meeting him in person for the first time, maintained his expression. "Agent Coulson has other tasks. That's why he couldn't come." Hearing that it was for another task, Charles quickly recalled various events in the Marvel Universe. Thor had not yet descended, so it wasn't to check on the hammer. Then he thought of the randomly appearing Tamari in his hand, suspecting if S.H.I.E.L.D. had discovered her and went to make contact. This possibility cannot be ruled out, and the likelihood was quite high. Nick Fury, seeing that Charles remained silent, continued, "For today's events, I want to express my gratitude to Mr. Charles and Ms. Tsunade for taking control of this disaster. Without your help, who knows what kind of trouble Ross and others would have caused." Listening to Nick Fury's words of gratitude, Charles smiled and then spoke, "If you really want to express gratitude, how about something practical? For example, send me 1800 energy cubes." Upon hearing Charles directly mention energy cubes, specifying a quantity of 1800, Nick Fury's mouth twitched involuntarily. This was quite a hefty request. While S.H.I.E.L.D. possessed the Tesseract, and its energy was practically limitless, the process of extracting this energy from the Tesseract and forging it into energy cubes was not a simple task. It was both challenging and resource-intensive. "I'll convey your message to General Ross. If they have the budget for it, I believe he won't be stingy," Nick Fury replied, attempting to shift the conversation away. He had no intention of spending money, especially after helping Ross clean up the mess. However, Charles, noticing the attempt to avoid the request, tapped his fingers on the table in a rhythmic pattern, a steady beat that echoed in the hearts of Nick Fury and Hill. After 10 seconds of this steady tapping, Charles stopped and straightforwardly said, "What exactly brings you here? If it's to avoid conflicts between me and the military, you've temporarily succeeded. If there's nothing else, please leave." Facing Charles's dismissal, Nick Fury spoke, "Mr. Charles, I'm planning to create an alliance dedicated to handling unforeseen events and safeguarding Earth's peace. I would like to invite you to join. Furthermore, among the proposed members is Tony Stark, Iron Man." Hill, who had remained silent until now, looked surprised at her director. Nick Fury specifically mentioned Tony Stark, intending to leverage this point. Even if Charles didn't agree immediately but showed interest, Nick Fury would then approach Tony, saying that Charles was willing to join the team, thus coaxing him into the fold. However, what Nick Fury didn't know was that Charles was already well aware of his Avengers initiative. "I'm not interested in playing house with you. I have no intention of joining your team," Charles declared, refusing Nick Fury's offer and demeaning it as a mere game. Seeing Charles's direct refusal and his demeaning attitude, Nick Fury was visibly displeased, as in his mind, the first member of this team is Captain Marvel, who played a role in maintaining peace throughout the universe. As for trying to recruit Charles, it was merely an attempt, and if he showed interest, it would be an opportunity to explore the hidden village of Konoha behind him. Mr. Charles, safeguarding world peace is not child's play, Nick Fury asserted. And you should know that there are individuals with extraordinary powers beyond your group. Even the Hulk, whom you defeated, is just a product of the military. Nick Fury didn't hesitate to downplay the Hulk, implying that Banner's transformation was nothing more than a result of military experiments. Simultaneously, he subtly warned Charles that their extraordinary abilities weren't unique, and even someone he defeated, like Banner, wasn't a significant threat in S.H.I.E.L.D's eyes. Upon hearing Nick Fury's remarks, Charles couldn't help but burst into laughter. Quickly realizing his lapse in decorum, he apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, I just remembered an amusing joke. Usually, I don't laugh out loud due to my profession." Hearing Charles's explanation, both Nick Fury and Hill had faces showing extreme displeasure. Chapter 230, No Credit for Small Businesses. Nick Fury and Hill quickly adjusted their attitudes. As professional agents, they could easily swallow such sarcasm. However, they couldn't help but curse Charles internally. Nick Fury now knew that recruiting Charles had little hope. Still, he was displeased with how Charles perceived their cause as child's play. "Mr. Charles, it seems we have different views on our profession. May I ask why you think our work is a game?" Nick Fury inquired. Nick Fury was not naive, he sensed that Charles's mockery might carry different information. While he didn't believe there was much he didn't know about on Earth with the help of Kree technology, the fact that they hadn't found the location of the Hidden Leaf Village yet made him less confident in the Kree's capabilities. Perhaps there were still existences on Earth that he had yet to explore. Upon hearing Nick Fury's words, Charles raised an eyebrow. It seemed this guy wanted to freeload information from him. Charles made an internationally recognized gesture and said, "This involves secrets that are not easy to share. If you want to know, you have to take on a commissioned task, and the price for this information is much higher than you might imagine." Seeing that Charles wasn't falling for his trap, Nick Fury pondered for a moment before saying, "We came in haste and didn't bring energy blocks. Can we put this on credit for now?" Charles refused, saying, "No credit for small businesses." Charles wasn't afraid that Nick Fury would dare to owe him money, but he didn't want to reveal these secrets to him. Seeing Charles reject the idea of credit, Nick Fury didn't press on. However, he remembered Ross mentioning an issue with soldiers and brought it up. "Forget about the commissioned task for now, that's Coulson's responsibility. But there's another matter. The body of a soldier, Blonsky, from the military. I wonder if you can hand it over to me so I can take it back to them. After all, he was a soldier." Charles was surprised and asked, "Who is Blonsky?" Seeing Charles genuinely confused, Nick Fury explained, "General Ross mentioned that Blonsky's body is with you and hoped I could bring it back to them. You know, the military is a place with strong emotions, especially for a soldier who died in action." Nick Fury hadn't finished speaking when Charles suddenly realized. "You mean that yellow monster was originally a soldier? But it's not in my hands. Where could I hide such a big guy? He disappeared suddenly and ran away. Even if I caught him, do you think I would let him go now? There were two of those monsters at that time." Hearing Charles's words, Nick Fury realized he had been fooled by Ross. No wonder that guy retreated so quickly. He thought the Pentagon's orders had come into effect, but it turned out Ross had played him. Seizing the opportunity, Ross shifted the blame to him. Nick Fury, now looking seriously at Charles, asked, "So you're saying that what Ross is after is that yellow monster, and you let go of the green one, Banner?" Charles nodded and replied, "When that yellow monster disappeared suddenly, the green one, as you mentioned, Banner, turned around and fled on his own. We didn't try to stop him." Hearing Charles's words, Nick Fury couldn't help but curse, "Damn it." Nick Fury knew that Ross would definitely shift some of the blame onto him unless he could bring back Blonsky's body. But hearing Charles's words, Blonsky might not be dead at all. Thinking about this, Nick Fury's expression became even more unsightly. Meanwhile, Charles looked at him with interest, not saying much. Nick Fury stood up and said, "Since that's the case, we won't disturb you any longer." Nick Fury, along with Hill, left Charles's agency. Watching the two leave, Charles disdainfully sneered. "You want to go back and investigate it? Ridiculous." After that, Charles also left the meeting room, preparing to return to his room for some rest. Exiting Charles's agency building, Nick Fury, with his team of agents, boarded a Quinjet and took off, heading back to the Triskelion. Sitting on the plane, Nick Fury looked at Hill and asked, "What do you think of Charles Doyle, and what he said earlier?" Hill pondered for a moment before responding, "He's arrogant and doesn't take us or even the military seriously. However, he's relatively restrained. He doesn't become a lawless madman just because he has extraordinary powers. But he also doesn't abide by societal norms. Regardless of his previous profession as a mercenary or this title he claims to be a ninja," Hill continued, "in Japan, a ninja is a profession similar to a mercenary. Although I don't know why an extraordinary organization would call themselves that, since they do, and considering his office and the ongoing bounty missions, I think there might be some connection. As for what he said, it may be related to the Hidden Leaf Village. After all, he has extraordinary abilities and has been hiding. He might really possess some secrets that we, at S.H.I.E.L.D, are unaware of. After all, our organization hasn't been around for long." Hearing Hill's analysis, Nick Fury nodded in agreement. After some contemplation, he said, "Keep today's conversation confidential. Don't disclose it to anyone. The confidentiality level will be the highest." Hill nodded without saying anything more. At this moment, Nick Fury was thinking about how to handle Ross's blame and reflecting on Charles's words. Could there be another organization in this world that he doesn't know about, protecting the world? Otherwise, why would Charles say that they are playing a child's game? Nick Fury was well aware of the act they were putting on. Playing around, protecting the world. Could a more powerful organization be safeguarding the world? Soon, the Quinjet returned to headquarters, interrupting Nick Fury's contemplation. He wondered if he was overthinking or if Charles simply looked down on their organization. Chapter 231, Sparring. At this moment, Charles went upstairs and headed towards his room. However, he noticed Tsunade standing outside his door. Curious about Tsunade's purpose, Charles asked, "Is there something going on?" Tsunade approached him, looking at Charles, and said, "Have the special agents left?" "They have already left." Tsunade grabbed Charles's arm and started walking downstairs, saying, "Let's spar in the training room. I want to see how much progress you've made with your chakra-enhanced strength." Being pulled along by Tsunade, Charles didn't resist and followed her into the training room. In the center of the training room, Tsunade looked at Charles with a serious expression. "It's not just chakra-enhanced strength. You can use other ninjutsu as well. I won't hold back either." Upon hearing Tsunade's words, Charles's expression turned serious. This sparring session meant a lot to him, allowing him to gauge the gap between himself and Tsunade, a high-level ninja. Due to the system, Tsunade couldn't kill him, and any injuries she inflicted would instantly heal. Thus, Tsunade became his best practical opponent. Understood. Charles and Tsunade formed a seal of opposition. Charles stomped the ground beneath his feet, causing the floor to instantly crack open, revealing the cement surface below. In an instant, his figure appeared in front of Tsunade, and his right hand gathered blue chakra as he struck towards her. Facing Charles's rushing punch, Tsunade didn't dodge. She blocked with her left hand and countered with a right hook. Boom! Charles immediately used his left arm to block, but he still took a powerful blow. Following that, Tsunade performed a turning side kick, sending Charles flying several meters away. Tsunade's speed exceeded Charles's expectations. He felt like he couldn't keep up. "Is this the gap between me and a Sunin? Sharingan, activate." Seeing the Sharingan in Charles's eyes, Tsunade furrowed her brow slightly. However, considering the Byakugan that he had used on the battlefield, she didn't think he was from the Uchiha clan. Still, she was curious about Charles's abilities. Was he gathering the bloodline and abilities of various people? With the activation of the Sharingan, Charles's reaction speed and visual acuity instantly increased. Even his attack speed became faster. Swoosh! Charles rushed forward again, and the two engaged in a fierce battle. Infinite Chaos Dance. Charles's body left after images as he attacked with incredible speed and every punch was infused with his monstrous strength. However, Tsunade effortlessly blocked each of his punches and commented, "Fast punches, but lacking in strength." After saying that, Tsunade delivered a powerful uppercut, sending Charles airborne. Though he managed to block in time, he was still sent flying into the air. Seeing Charles in midair, Tsunade instantly appeared above him and prepared a powerful downward strike. Feeling the terrifying force from Tsunade, Charles immediately used the body flicker technique to evade. Boom! Watching the shattered substitution wood, Charles sighed in relief. Although the kick wouldn't have killed him, it was still painful and somewhat embarrassing. The moment Tsunade landed, Charles retaliated with a kick, intending to repay in kind. Boom! The kick hit the ground, creating a large pit with sand and debris scattering. Suddenly, Tsunade appeared in front of Charles, making a hand gesture with the intention of tapping his forehead. Boom! Before Charles could evade, he was sent flying by a powerful forehead flick. His body tumbled through the air and finally stopped after crashing into a wall. Realizing he couldn't match Tsunade in taijutsu, Charles decided to shift to ninjutsu for their spar. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Several kunai flew towards Tsunade as distractions rather than lethal attacks. Observing the incoming kunai, Tsunade took out a kunai of her own and deflected them all. Taking advantage of this distraction, Charles swiftly formed hand seals. Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. A massive crimson fireball rapidly headed towards Tsunade, blocking her line of sight and obscuring Charles. Gathering a substantial amount of chakra on her fist, Tsunade faced the incoming fireball without dodging and punched it, extinguishing the flames. Just as Tsunade extinguished the great fireball, she noticed that Charles had completed hand seals and was charging towards her with the Chidori. Seeing this, Tsunade realized she couldn't evade in time. So, she stomped on the ground, creating a large pit beneath her, and descended into it. Charles, adjusting his direction, continued his descent with the Chidori. However, taking advantage of the opening, Tsunade instantly used a body flicker technique to evade. In the end, Charles's Chidori pierced through the substitution wood, failing to hit Tsunade. Observing the unsuccessful tactic, Charles wasn't discouraged. He dispersed the Chidori and leaped out of the pit. Seeing Charles coming back up, Tsunade waved her hand and said, "All right, let's pause." Hearing Tsunade calling for a break, Charles asked, "What's wrong?" "I'm done. It's not fair. When you hit me, I get hurt, but when I hit you, it doesn't even scratch you. It's too unfair, let's stop sparring." When using the forward flick, Tsunade had applied some force but felt an unusual resistance, as if an invisible force blocked the impact. Although she had sent Charles flying, he didn't even receive a scratch, making the sparring session unfair and unfulfilling. Seeing Tsunade losing interest in the spar, Charles approached and asked, "Tsunade, can you give me some guidance on my chakra-enhanced strength and my fist technique?" Hearing Charles's request, Tsunade pondered for a moment before agreeing, "Fine, I've noticed some issues with your techniques." Tsunade didn't hold back and began earnestly guiding Charles on improving the connection between certain moves, especially when using leaf-style fist techniques and maximizing the attack power with chakra-enhanced strength. On the other side, in his office, Nick Fury returned and took out a uniquely shaped summoning device from his safe, placing it on his desk. Chapter 232, Tamari. Looking at the device in front of him, Nick Fury's mind wasn't on Captain Marvel, but rather on the images of Charles's battle with Abomination that he got from Ross. After watching the video, he gained a direct understanding of Charles's terrifying strength and couldn't help but think about the hidden leaf village behind him. It gave him a headache. However, looking at the device in front of him, Nick Fury took a deep breath, as if Charles's strength and the hidden leaf village were no longer a concern. He then put away the device. This time, he didn't lock it in the safe, he planned to keep it close by in case of need. After all, besides summoning her, he didn't have the means to suppress Charles's power, and he couldn't use a large number of missiles to bombard Charles in the city. If Charles and his forces had any evil intentions, he would call back Captain Marvel to deliver a fatal blow. "I hope I won't have to use it." The next day, Charles stretched lazily as he sat up from the bed. After the guidance from Tsunade the previous night, his strength had improved significantly. Especially in the coordination of some ninjutsu, he had made greater progress. In the combination of taijutsu and chakra-enhanced strength, he had found a balance. Thinking of Tsunade's strength, Charles realized that he still had a lot to improve. Although he had killed Abomination, he couldn't be complacent. Shaking off these distractions, Charles's consciousness entered the system space for the daily check-in. Ding! Check-in successful, reputation plus 300. After collecting the reputation, Charles directly opened the mall interface. He wanted to see if there were any suitable fragments. But for the past 3 days, there had been no satisfying ninja fragments, and he hadn't purchased any. Opening the ninja interface in the system wall, 4 ninja figures appeared. Asuma Sarutobi fragments, daily limit 0/4, 300 gold coins/1 piece. Rock Lee fragments, Naruto daily limit 0/4, 80 gold coins/1 piece. Suijutsu fragments, daily limit 0/4, 420 gold coins/1 piece. Young Kakashi fragments, daily limit 0/4, 180 gold coins/1 piece. Looking at the 4 newly refreshed ninjas, Charles nodded. This result was acceptable, much better than the previous few days. The price of Asuma's fragments, at 300 gold coins per piece, was reasonable, but Charles wasn't attracted. Since he didn't have a single piece of Asuma, buying one wouldn't make much sense. Rock Lee's price was still friendly, and without hesitation, Charles bought 4 fragments, spending 320 gold coins. As for Suijutsu, encountering him again was a good opportunity, so without hesitation, he bought 4 fragments after spending 1,680 gold coins. After spending 2,100 gold coins, Charles had 11,804 gold coins left and decided not to continue. He did not proceed with the expenditure but directly exited the system space, starting to get up and freshen up. On the other side, Mexico City. In a conference room of a hotel, it was Tamari, and in front of her was Agent Carlson of S.H.I.E.L.D. During this time, Tamari had already wiped out several unruly gangs and also found a local translator in Mexico. Regarding the address 71 Forest Hills Avenue, Indiana, the Queens District, she had already gathered information. Just as she was about to leave, Carlson, who had been gathering information on her during this time, came to her. During this time, Carlson had also collected quite a bit of information about her, and he even knew her name. Carlson took out a replica of the Leaf Village headband, placing it on the table, and said, "Ms. Tamari, I mean no harm." Seeing this familiar item, Tamari held it in her hand, examined it for a moment, and then asked, "Where did you get this thing?" Seeing that the other party recognized this item, Carlson introduced, "Ms. Tamari, I am an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. We mainly deal with extraordinary matters like yours. Since you recognize this item, I believe you also know about the Hidden Leaf Village." Looking at the man in front of her, Tamari frowned slightly. She had just arrived in this world a few days ago, and she was still unfamiliar with many things. She was willing to talk because she saw the Leaf Village ninja headband in the man's hand when they first met. Now slightly impatient, Tamari asked, "What do you want?" Feeling the impatience of the other party, Carlson quickly spoke, "It's like this, Ms. Tamari. I don't know what your purpose is here, and what I can help you with. I am quite familiar with Charles Doyle from the Hidden Leaf Village. I wonder if you are here to find him as well." Hearing the other party's words, Tamari was somewhat surprised. This person actually knew Lord Charles. However, Tamari did not completely trust the other party. Considering the strength of the other party, she still had some reservations. However, she didn't reject it outright and said, "I'm going to Charles's agency at 71 Forest Hills Avenue, Indiana, Queens, New York." Hearing that she was going to this place, Carlson's thoughts quickly surfaced in his mind. Then he put on a smile and said, "Ms. Tamari, I am an old acquaintance of Mr. Charles. How about I take you there? I found that you don't have any identity information on this side, and it's troublesome to apply for a passport and take a plane. It will also take a lot of time." Hearing the suggestion from the man in front of her, Tamari agreed. Given the passport, visa, and other issues, she had already planned to sneak in from the border. Seeing this person who took the initiative to help, she didn't refuse and said, "Fine, thank you." Hearing her agreement, Carlson continued to wear a smile, "In that case, Ms. Tamari, let me take you. We have a special plane that can take you directly to Mr. Charles's office in New York." Soon, Tamari, accompanied by Tamari and Carlson, left the hotel and took a car to the airport. A very small plane was parked at the airport. Tamari followed Carlson and boarded the plane, heading to New York. On the plane, Tamari's expression remained unchanged, and she showed no curiosity about this novel thing, the plane. During the flight to the plane, Carlson kept chatting with Tamari, talking about some interesting stories and not forgetting to mention Charles Doyle and the group of ninjas around him. Carlson suddenly asked, "Ms. Tamari, excuse me for asking, but the headband you wear on your neck, how is it different from the one from the Hidden Leaf Village? Is there any distinction?" Chapter 233, Intelligence Gathering. Upon hearing Coulson's words, Tamari pointed to the headband around her neck and asked, "You mean this?" "Yes, I noticed that the markings on yours are different, but you're all ninja." "What's the difference?" Coulson inquired. Looking at Coulson's seemingly friendly smile, Tamari, however, hugged Kamatari tightly. In her original world, the headbands of the Sand Village ninja were widely recognized, even by civilians in towns. So, she had no intention of hiding her identity as a ninja from the Sand Village. She smiled and said, "This headband represents the Hidden Sand Village, and I, wearing this headband, am a ninja from the Hidden Sand Village." Hearing that it was from the Hidden Sand Village, a term distinct from the Hidden Leaf Village, Coulson thought to himself that everything was as he suspected. Different headbands represented different hidden villages. At the same time, Coulson was somewhat astonished. If just one Hidden Leaf Village was already so powerful, having several hidden villages would create an extraordinary force that was truly terrifying. "May I ask, Ms. Tamari, what business do you have with Mr. Charles?" Coulson asked. "And I noticed that there are quite a few Hidden Leaf Village ninjas around Mr. Charles, appearing directly by his side." While stroking Kamatari in her arms, Tamari analyzed Coulson's words. She did not trust him simply because of a headband with an obvious different texture and the name he mentioned. "Does Mr. Charles have a lot of dealings with Hidden Leaf Village ninjas? And which ones have come over?" Tamari did not answer Coulson's questions directly but instead raised her own doubts. After some thought, Coulson decided to speak. "The ones I know of are Irika Umino, Suzuki Uchiha, Naruto Uzumaki, Rock Lee, Shizuan, and Tsunade Senju, a total of 6 people. I'm not sure if there are any other ninjas." As Tamari heard the names at the beginning, her expression remained unchanged, showing that she wasn't particularly interested. Although she had encountered some of them during the Chunin exams, she didn't feel the huge difference in strength. However, when she heard the name Tsunade Senju, she was slightly taken aback. Just this brief change caught Coulson's attention, and he asked, "Do you know Tsunade Senju, Ms. Tamari?" Tamari laughed self-deprecatingly, "Someone like Tsunade, a big shot, how could I know her? I've just heard her name." Hearing Tamari's response, Coulson's interest grew. He immediately probed, "Could you tell me her story? I'm quite curious." As Coulson was prepared to listen attentively, Tamari remained silent. Seeing that he didn't get the information he wanted, Coulson didn't get discouraged. Instead, he turned his attention to the weasel-like creature in Tamari's arms and asked, "This weasel is cute. Does it need something to eat?" "No, thanks." In the end, Coulson failed to extract any more information, and even details related to ninjas were not obtained. On the other side, at the Triskelion Tower. In Nick Fury's office, Agent Hill walked in with a piece of information. "Director, there are 2 more Leaf Village ninjas at Charles's agency," Hill said, handing the file in her hand to Nick Fury. Looking at the information on the file, Nick Fury murmured, "Kakashi Hatake and Niji Hyuga. It seems that Charles's team is growing. What about Coulson's situation?" "Director, Coulson has met the other party and is currently flying to New York with her." Nick Fury pondered for a moment, then said, "Once Coulson escorts her, have him return immediately to report." "Yes, Director." As Hill left, Nick Fury rubbed his temples. Ross had really caused him trouble, it was turning into a complicated situation. Meanwhile, at Charles' agency, Charles had finished washing up and, with his laptop in hand, arrived at the dining area downstairs. As Charles was eating his sandwich and preparing to open his laptop, breaking news suddenly appeared on the nearby television. Charles looked up at the news report on the TV. On 71st Avenue in the Queens District, a yellow monster appeared, causing widespread destruction on the streets, demolishing the entire street. A resident of this street witnessed the entire event, the reporter said, holding a microphone and interviewing the witness. "It was enormous, covered in spikes, somewhat similar to the green giant that appeared in previous news, but it's yellow." The reporter then showed a video segment capturing the abomination wreaking havoc, smashing vehicles. This footage was recorded by a camera on a car parked downstairs. "The yellow giant has been defeated, and the one who intervened is the mysterious person who previously appeared at the Iron Man battle." The reporter then showed a photo, a picture Charles from the back while he was kicking the abomination. Based on photo comparison, this mysterious powerful figure bears a striking resemblance to Mr. Charles Doyle, who recently attended the Stark Industries board meeting. Here, we boldly speculate that this new superhero is a close friend of Iron Man, one of the major shareholders of Stark Industries, Mr. Charles Doyle. Seeing the news, Charles smiled and didn't pay much attention. The exposure of his identity had no impact on his life, he was still himself, just like Tony Stark as Iron Man. It wouldn't affect his life at all. Unlike the immature young Spider-Man, whose life was disrupted due to exposure. Charles wasn't interested in the news on the TV. After finishing his sandwich, he opened his laptop and continued his work searching for mysterious items in the second-hand market. Just as Charles started his laptop, the phone placed on the table rang. Seeing that the caller ID showed Tony Stark's name, Charles answered the call. "Hey, buddy, did you see the news? How's the strength of that big guy? This kind of thing, you should have called me to join." Listening to Tony's voice on the phone, Charles opened the previously accessed website while speaking. "Saw it, doesn't affect me. But that Abomination and the Hulk, your Mark II won't be able to handle them for sure." Chapter 234, Dragon Ring. Upon hearing Charles's words, Tony exclaimed, "Hey, do you not believe in my strength? My armor has been upgraded a lot recently." At this moment, Charles opened his browsing history, and his attention was immediately drawn to it. He didn't pay attention to Tony's words. Looking at his browsing history, Charles directly said, "Tony, I have something to do. We'll talk later." Without waiting for Tony's response, Charles hung up the phone. Opening the page, he looked at the sales information. Dragon Ring, a magical ring with incredible power. Price, $100,000. Contact, David, contact number, XXXXXXXX. Looking at the information, Charles carefully examined the style of the ring and the contact number. He recalled the memories in his mind. Merlin's Dragon Ring, inheriting the legacy of becoming the new Supreme Merlin and killing Moana, the one who would destroy the world. Thinking about the Apprentice Magician movie in his memory, it seemed like every villain was shouting about destroying the world. But thinking about the nesting doll that imprisoned countless villains and the appearance of two other rings besides the Dragon Ring successfully attracted Charles. This nesting doll seemed like a seal, each layer sealing a magician, but it was uncertain whether the sealed magician could become a rechargeable energy. Then there were those few rings. Charles was unsure if the nesting doll could be used as a rechargeable item, but those few rings, Charles was certain, could definitely be used for recharging. Without any hesitation, Charles picked up his phone and dialed the contact number provided on eBay. The call was quickly answered. "Hello, I saw that you are selling a dragon-shaped ring on eBay. Is it still available?" David, who was still lying on the bed and hadn't gotten up, suddenly woke up a lot when he heard this. He had posted this thing that left him a childhood shadow on the internet a long time ago. Although many people left comments, this was the first inquiry call. "The item is still with me. Are you interested in buying it?" Hearing that the item was still available, Charles knew that the plot had not started yet. He spoke, "I am very interested in your ring. I can accept the price of $100,000. How about we proceed with the transaction?" David, who was still a bit confused, instantly became awake. He said with excitement, $100,000? Are you sure there's no problem? If you are sure about buying, you can come to the New York University College of Arts and Sciences to find me. I'll be heading there later. Charles looked at the time on the computer, smiled, and said, "No problem, let's meet at New York University. Bring the ring, and I will bring the money. We'll exchange there." After confirming the ring transaction, Charles hung up the phone, got up, and went to the front desk. He instructed Erica, "Go to the underground vault and get me $100,000 in cash, pack it in a small backpack. I'll need it later." "Yes, Lord Charles." Watching Erica leave, Charles took out the key to his Mercedes from the cabinet where he put the car keys, but considering the damaged streets outside, he put it back. The roads were not repaired yet, and he couldn't drive his car. Soon, Erica came up with a small backpack and handed it to Charles. "Lord, there's $100,000 inside." "Thanks, Erica." With the backpack in hand, Charles was about to leave. At this moment, Erica suddenly spoke. "Lord Charles, I suggest you take the back door. There are a lot of media outside, but our people have blocked them from entering." Upon hearing Erica's words, Charles stopped his steps and then said, "Your suggestion is good. After saying that, Charles did not choose to use the main entrance but instead walked out through the back door of the office. Taking a detour from the back door to the main street, Charles saw many reporters and media personnel crowded around the agency gate. However, his subordinates kept them out. Charles nodded in satisfaction. Dealing with these matters was indeed better left to his group of high-table envoys. Glancing at the road that was being repaired, he turned and left. On the other side. After hanging up the phone, David got up from the bed and went to the living room, taking out a bottle of soda from the refrigerator. In the living room, the chubby African-American, Bennett, threw a pack of snacks to David. "Happy birthday, David!" Catching the snacks, David looked at his friend excitedly and said, "Thanks, Bennett." After that, David, holding the snacks and drinks, made his way to the dining table. Bennett, snacking on some treats, looked at David and remarked, "You woke up pretty early." Observing the delicious pizza on the table, David explained, "Professor Heidemann asked me to give a physics introductory class to his university class." Bennett, surprised, exclaimed, "What? You're teaching advanced physics to liberal arts students?" David, feeling helpless, responded, "Yeah, I had no other option." Bennett snapped his fingers and said to David, "Listen, the biology department is planning to have a wild night tonight. We even managed to invite a cheerleader from Princeton." Speaking of this, Bennett's expression was full of excitement. David, opening his soda, replied, "Oh, they are not easy to handle. But I also have a good thing to reward myself today. Maybe it's the birthday gift from heaven." As he spoke, David turned around, took a pair of socks from the sock drawer, and the dragon ring thrown into the pile of socks. Bennett curiously asked, "What good thing?" At this point, David turned around, placed the dragon-shaped ring on the table, and put on the socks. Looking at what David put on the table, Bennett was a bit stunned, then stood up in amazement, and then exclaimed loudly, "David, don't tell me that the ring marked by you for $100,000 has been ordered. Oh my God, how could someone be so crazy?" Speaking, Bennett picked up the ring from the table, took a look, then walked over, and gave David a hug. "David, are you sure that person is not kidding you? $100,000 is not a small amount. It's enough for you to buy a Porsche and still have a lot left." David broke free from Bennett's embrace and took back the ring. Then he said, "I don't know if it's true or not, but the other party said he would come to my college and find me. He would also give me the money there while taking the ring." At this point, Bennett suggested, "Hey, if it's really sold, why not have a party tonight for your birthday?" Chapter 235, Tamari. David raised his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "In order to graduate, I have to finish the Tesla coil experiment first." Bennett clapped his hands and walked to the fridge. Pointing at a photo of a wolf pack on the fridge, he said, "David, do you know the story of the Grey Wolf?" David immediately pleaded, "No, no, no, please don't. Stop talking about your Grey Wolf. I can't." Bennett ignored David's refusal, took down the photo, and approached him. "The Grey Wolf is a social animal. It must find a mate, hunt, and search for food." Bennett sat in front of David, holding the photo and loudly declared, "You must participate in group activities." Then, with a high-pitched voice, he added, "Otherwise, you will be expelled from the wolf pack." After delivering this speech, Bennett resumed speaking normally. "A lonely life ends up being eaten by a big bear." Watching Bennett's performance, David nodded. Yes, you said it well. It looks like I need to figure something out to survive." After reaching an agreement, David got up, dressed, and headed towards New York University. Charles hailed a taxi on the street. New York University. Sitting in the cab, the once clear sky suddenly became overcast, signaling an imminent rain. As the taxi moved, a strong wind picked up, followed by heavy rain. Watching this scene, Charles closed his eyes to relax. An hour later, the taxi stopped. "Sir, we've arrived at New York University." Hearing the driver's voice, Charles opened his eyes, looking at the continuing rain outside. He sighed, then took out an umbrella from the storage compartment, paid the fare, and got out of the cab. Under the umbrella, Charles entered the campus and arrived at the College of Arts and Sciences, outside the physics lab. Through the classroom window, Charles saw a young student lecturing. He picked up his phone and dialed David's number. David, in the midst of his lecture, felt the vibration of his phone. Spotting Charles making a call outside the classroom, he immediately guessed that he was the expected buyer. Looking at the students in the classroom, David cleared his throat. Take a 10-minute break, think about what I just talked about. If you have any questions, you can ask me later. After giving instructions, David walked out of the classroom and approached Charles. Sir, are you the one purchasing my ring? Watching David in front of him, Charles took off the small backpack from his body and directly threw it onto him. David hastily caught the backpack, looking somewhat puzzled at Charles. This is the $100,000 to purchase the ring. You can take a look, Charles said. Upon hearing Charles's words, David visibly paused. He hadn't expected the buyer to be so straightforward. He then opened the zipper on the backpack, revealing wads of $10 bills neatly packed inside. Looking at the pile of money, David's mind was somewhat shaken. He glanced around cautiously, ensuring no one was watching, and then pulled out the dragon ring from his pocket, handing it to Charles. As soon as Charles received the dragon ring, a system prompt echoed in her mind. Ding! Detected rechargeable item. Do you want to recharge? No. Charles promptly rejected the system's prompt. At this moment, the dragon-shaped ring, held in his palm, seemed to come to life. It climbed onto Charles's ring finger by itself, its dragon tail winding around the finger to secure itself. Observing this scene, David rubbed his eyes. He had tested the ring on family and friends, and none could wear it except himself. However, today's buyer managed to do so. Looking at the money in his arms and then at the ring on the buyer's finger, David murmured, could everything be real? Or is it that I'm not the only special one? Having completed the transaction, Charles shook his hand, finding no trace of the ring coming loose. He nodded in satisfaction, I like this ring. Farewell, David. With these words, Charles Doyle, holding an umbrella, left New York University. Watching his departing figure, David shook off the chaotic thoughts in his mind. He had to go back to class. Not to mention, today he encountered his childhood crush, making it a double joy. Zipping up his backpack, David turned and entered the classroom, continuing with today's lecture. On the other side, Carlson, accompanied by Tamari, had already arrived at New York's airport. He drove Tamari to Charles's agency at 71 Forest Hills Avenue, Queens. Although the weather was stormy, Tamari remained curious about this metropolis. Despite the fragile physical condition of its inhabitants, the technological development and towering buildings fascinated her. Rain might be considered unfavorable weather for others, but for Tamari, from the Wind Country's hidden sand village, rainfall was a heavenly gift. As the car advanced, it eventually stopped at the intersection of 71st Avenue. Looking at the destroyed streets and houses under repair with caution tape, even Carlson was surprised. What had happened here? They got out of the car, and with umbrellas in hand, they walked to the entrance of Charles's agency. Due to the heavy rain, the reporters who were previously blocking the entrance had dispersed. This is Mr. Charles's agency. I have other matters to attend to, so I won't escort you inside. After saying these words, Carlson didn't linger and directly left. Seeing the ninja with the forehead protector, the doorman opened the agency's door and gestured for Tamari to enter. Holding her summoning beast, Tamari put away her umbrella and walked straight into the lobby of the agency. At this moment, Irika, who was on duty at the front desk, was checking the latest missions from the Continental Hotel on the network. He needed to do some screening to find suitable tasks. Hearing someone coming in, he looked up and saw Tamari with a ninja headband. Irika was momentarily stunned, thinking, Mr. Charles has brought someone, and it's not a Leaf Village ninja. This. Chapter 236, Intelligence. As Tamari entered, he noticed Irika sitting behind the service desk, especially with his distinctive Chayunin attire. Approaching the desk directly, Tamari and Irika locked eyes. After a brief silence, Irika took the initiative to speak, I am Irika Umino. Lord Charles is currently not here, but I'll assist you with the check-in process. Later, someone will provide you with identity information and introduce you to some common knowledge of this world. Tamari looked at the man in front of him, extended a hand, and said with a smile, I am Tamari. Could you please tell me if there are any other ninjas from the Hidden Sand Village besides me? After shaking hands with Tamari, Irika continued, currently, you are the first ninja from an outside village besides Konoha. Following this, Irika summoned a waiter who took Tamari to an empty guest room, serving as Tamari's temporary accommodation. On the other side. Triskelion Tower. After bringing Tamari to Charles' agency, Coulson returned and knocked on Nick Fury's office door. As he entered, Nick Fury handed him a tablet containing the latest information. "Director, any instructions?" Coulson asked. Nick Fury looked up and then said, "Take a look at the latest data first." Upon hearing the director's words, Coulson took the tablet, opened the video footage showing Charles's battle against Abomination, along with some analysis reports. Observing the information on the tablet, Coulson expressed disbelief. His strength has reached such a level. Nick Fury nodded, remaining silent. Soon, Coulson finished reviewing all the data and placed the tablet down. After watching, "Any thoughts?" Nick Fury inquired. After a moment of contemplation, Coulson spoke, "The military's experiments are highly uncontrollable. While they've created powerful monsters, their methods are excessively brutal, filled with destructive desires, much like the Red Skull from years ago. No, they might be even worse than the Red Skull. At least the Red Skull had some self-control, but the Green Giant lacks any form of rationality. As for the strength of Charles Doyle, Tsunade, and others, they are more terrifying than the monsters created by the military. Especially since they reside in the city, particularly a metropolis like New York. Once they engage in destruction, there's no one to stop them. We can't possibly launch large-scale missiles or even nuclear bombs into the city. Regular missiles or RPGs won't even harm them a bit. Most importantly, Charles has the Hidden Leaf Village behind him, and there's no telling how many extraordinary individuals like him they have. Even now, we don't know how Charles's strength is classified within their internal ranking." Hearing Coulson's words, Nick Fury rubbed his temples. If these people were to harbor evil intentions, the resulting destruction would be immense. After a moment of contemplation, Nick Fury spoke, "What intelligence have you gathered from the ninja you contacted?" Upon hearing the director's inquiry about Tamari, Coulson quickly reported, "Tamari is a ninja from the Hidden Sand Village. Her age is around 13, a genin. From the gathered intelligence, it appears that the ninja world not only has Konoha but also the Hidden Sand Village, and there might be other hidden villages as well. Moreover, ninjas tend to cultivate their own pets. Charles has a ninja dog, and Tamari has a weasel carrying a scythe. I suspect they possess considerable combat strength, otherwise, they wouldn't carry them around or be bestowed with the ninja headbands. Regarding Tsunade's identity, there shouldn't be any issues. In Tamari's eyes, Tsunade is a powerful and renowned ninja. However, I haven't been able to find out Tamari's purpose for coming here, or why a ninja from the Hidden Sand Village would seek Charles Doyle of Konoha. But we can try to recruit her and gather some intelligence from her. Perhaps the Hidden Sand Village is also considering supporting an agent. Of course, these are just my speculations." Looking at the gathered intelligence, Nick Fury nodded in satisfaction and then said, "Dig out the purpose of the Hidden Sand Village coming here as much as possible. Since they're divided into two ninja villages, there must be competition between them. It also provides us with two sources to gather intelligence. Once Tamari leaves Charles' agency and establishes her own base or station, immediately make contact. Charles needs energy blocks, and I assume the Hidden Sand Village behind Tamari also has requirements. I'll authorize some energy blocks for you to use in purchasing information from both sides. It's best if we can find out their location and the true purpose of their presence." Upon hearing Nick Fury's instructions, Coulson responded with a solemn expression, "Understood, Director." "Good, now go check the data. Charles has gained 2 more ninjas on his side." "Yes." Coulson then left the director's office. At this moment, Nick Fury stood up, looked through the window at the rain-drenched city, and couldn't help but sigh. Ever since Captain Marvel left, superhumans, a phenomenon unseen for a long time on Earth, were emerging like mushrooms after rain. On the other side, Charles was sitting in the car, talking on the phone. "No, everything's fine. Despite the extensive destruction, their strength isn't that remarkable. No one at the agency was harmed. Okay, supervise the construction of the base. Deploy more manpower to speed up the progress. If needed, we'll invest more money to bring in additional workers." After chatting for a few moments with Ginny, Charles hung up the phone. Many things were not suitable for communication over the phone, so they didn't delve into details. Soon, Charles arrived back at his office. As he entered, Irika from the service desk hurriedly reported, "Lord Charles, Tamari from the Hidden Sand Village is here." Hearing that Tamari had returned, Charles thought to himself, she's quite fast, she managed to return so quickly. Ask her to come to the lounge area to see me. Yes, Lord Charles. Charles went to the lounge area and took a seat in a booth. He looked at the dragon ring on his hand, feeling curious. Isn't this thing supposed to be worn only by the next Supreme Merlin? Could it be that I have the innate talent to become the Supreme Merlin? Or could it be that chakra can also serve as a magical power source? As Charles pondered, he realized that ninjutsu and magic indeed had many similarities. Just as Charles was contemplating the identity of the magician and the Supreme Merlin, Tamari walked in carrying commentary. Chapter 237, Plan. Watching Tamari walking towards him, Charles gently spoke, "Sit." Tamari sat on the sofa opposite Charles, looking at the man who brought him to this world with respect, and said, "Lord Charles." Charles nodded, then spoke in a gentle tone, "You've done very well to come from Mexico to New York so quickly. I am very satisfied. What feelings did you have on your way here? Did you encounter any strange people or events?" Upon hearing Charles's questions, Tamari organized her thoughts and began to speak. This world seems to be much more peaceful, but there are still many violent organizations and forces. Even the physical quality of ordinary civilians is much lower compared to the common people in the ninja world. I don't know if it's because for some other reason, but during my few days in Mexico, I didn't meet a single strong person. I haven't even encountered someone at the level of a ninja academy student. But the technology here is very advanced, and daily necessities are readily available. Compared to the citizens of the Land of Wind, the people here are too fortunate. Apparently, from Tamari's current understanding, the Land of Wind is much worse in the living standards of its people compared to New York and even Mexico. At this point, Tamari even felt a kind of envy. If the people of the Land of Wind could have such a living environment, families wouldn't have to endure such hardships, the desire for water resources wouldn't be so severe, and there might not be wars initiated to compete for fertile land outside. After a brief pause, Tamari continued, "I can come here so quickly mainly because Agent Carlson from S.H.I.E.L.D. used their plane to bring me over. Lord Charles, S.H.I.E.L.D. has replicated the headband from Konoha and asked me for information about Konoha and the Hidden Sand Village. However, apart from the name of the Hidden Sand Village, I haven't revealed any other information to them." Listening to Tamari's account, Charles nodded approvingly. However, the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. replicated Konoha's headband indicated their intention to infiltrate Konoha. At the same time, a new idea emerged in Charles's mind. Could it be possible to establish a separate base for Tamari from the Hidden Sand Village? This way, it could help to better divide the ninja from different villages and facilitate extracting more resources from S.H.I.E.L.D. Just like each holy land under the control of Kamatage, only he knew that all the ninjas from different villages were taking orders from him. With this idea in mind, Charles had new arrangements for Tamari. However, this matter couldn't be rushed. Adequate preparation was needed, and resources such as identity, funds, and other supplies had to be provided to Tamari. It would be even better if one or two more ninjas from the Hidden Sand Village could be introduced, making it seem like the Hidden Sand Village was not much smaller than Konoha. Tamari, you've done well. Do not leak any intelligence from the ninja world to the outside. For now, follow Irika and learn about the intelligence information in this world and carry out a few missions at the Continental Hotel to understand the local patterns. Is your identity information handled? Chunin Irika has already contacted the Continental Hotel and the staff there have already processed the identity information for me. Seeing that Irika has taken care of Tamari's information, Charles nodded, "Good, then go and learn from Irika for now." "Yes, Lord Charles." Afterwards, Tamari got up and left, heading towards Irika at the service desk. Seeing Tamari leave, Charles got up and walked towards the training room. He wanted to study the dragon ring to see if it could enhance ninjutsu. It was already evening. On the other side, in an apartment building, an elderly couple looked at the continuously shaking earthenware jar. The elderly husband said, "I really don't understand why you bought this junk." The wife retorted, "Junk? This is an antique." The husband pointed at the shaking jar and said, "Antique? It's just trash from the flea market." Just as the husband finished speaking, the lid of the earthenware jar suddenly flew off, and a black veil burst out, transforming into a person. "I came out first, right?" Looking at the person who emerged, the woman's legs went weak, and she fainted. Maxim looked at the couple in the room and said with a smile, "It seems I came out first." While speaking, he picked up the earthenware jar from the floor and said, "Our sentences are over, Balthazar." Maxim walked towards the window, holding the earthenware jar, and continued, "When I go to get the nesting dolls from David, I'll say hello for you." Then, he directly threw the earthenware jar out of the high-rise window and said with a smile, "Farewell, Balthazar." As the earthenware jar fell rapidly, another black veil emerged from the opening. Balthazar struggled to crawl out of the jar just before it shattered on the ground. The earthenware jar made a cracking sound as it hit the ground, breaking into pieces. At this moment, Balthazar climbed down from the windowsill. The location where the falling object had caused a commotion was now surrounded by a group of people discussing. "Did you see that? It almost hit me on the head. It was so close. Who throws things around like this?" Looking at the distant building and its decorations, Balthazar had an idea in mind and headed towards the building. At this time, David, who had been busy all day, returned to his room. As he entered the house, he went straight to the refrigerator, preparing to drink a bottle of soda to quench his thirst. As he took out a drink and was about to close the refrigerator door, David noticed a piece of homework stuck to the door. David Stuller's The Life of Napoleon Bonaparte, Mrs. Alga's 4th grade assignment. Seeing this assignment suddenly appearing on the refrigerator door, David was stunned. At that moment, a voice from the side startled him. "Getting a B is not bad." The speaker was Maxim, the king of maggots, sitting nearby. He continued, "I've just been released after 10 years. In there, the only reading material I could find was the essay about Napoleon in your school bag. To be honest, my conclusion is that your writing skills are terrible." Listening to the man's critique, David explained, "I was only 9 years old at that time." Maxim responded, "Age is irrelevant." Then he asked about his goal, "Where's the doll? Number. More chapters, 150 plus p at trian.com/kfc. Comment. 6 comment. Vote. Chapter 239, Chapter 238, Matryoshka, Bonus Chapter. Seeing David's astonished expression, Maxim reminded him, "It's the Matryoshka you took from the store. It contains something very powerful. For me, it's particularly important. It's in your hands, and I want it back." David, upon hearing that it was about the Matryoshka, immediately spoke, "Listen, I threw it into the street." Upon hearing that the Matryoshka was thrown, Maxim stood up, his expression serious, and asked, "Which street? After such a long time, I really can't remember." Not satisfied with David's explanation, Maxim waved his hand, and a knife from David's table flew into his hand. Seeing this, David exclaimed, "Oh, my goodness!" Maxim pointed the knife at David and said, "I'll make you remember." David, afraid, quickly ran out of the room, but ended up bumping into the door. After a miserable cry, he hastily opened the door and fled. Maxim, seemingly unhurried, glanced at the wolf photos on the table. He then waved his hand, and the wolves in the photo were summoned, chasing after David. "Catch him!" Hearing the sounds from the room, David looked towards the door and saw several wolves rushing out towards him. Shocked, David exclaimed, "Wolves, no, 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 no." Without any delay, David quickly ran downstairs. As he exited the building, David hurried towards the pedestrian bridge of the light rail. At that moment, a neighbor coming to enter the building turned around, only to see several wolves rushing out. At this moment, the announcement of the subway station came, "Next stop, Macy Avenue, heading to St. Hills Avenue." David rushed to the gate, attempting to swipe his card to enter. However, after several failed attempts, he finally managed to swipe his card successfully just before the wolves caught up. Inside the station, David shouted, "Don't come closer, big grey wolves." David tried hiding under the light rail, but the incoming wolf pack still spotted him. Seeing this, David frantically ran forward but suddenly tripped and fell onto the light rail. Seeing this, Maxim ordered the nearby wolves, "Bite him to death." In despair, David covered his face with his hands and shouted, "No!" Large grey wolves jumped onto David, but in an instant, they transformed into adorable wolf pups and landed on him. David, looking at the cute little creatures in surprise, was momentarily stunned. Observing this scene, Maxim frowned. At the same time, a steel eagle descended from the sky, knocking Maxim off the platform and onto the light rail tracks. David, witnessing the steel giant eagle descending from the sky, exclaimed, "Oh, my God! Standing on the steel giant eagle, Balthazar opened his mouth. David, where's Matryoshka? David pointed towards Maxim behind him, stammering, he. Upon seeing this, Balthazar cast a spell at Maxim, interrupting his magic. As this moment, the train on the light rail was about to move, Balthazar shouted to David, hurry, come over here, quickly. Listening to the train's horn behind him, David immediately climbed onto the steel giant eagle. Balthazar, to prevent the train driver from witnessing this horrifying scene, waved his hand, sticking a newspaper to the driver's compartment window, temporarily blocking the driver's view. Seeing David climbing aboard, Balthazar threw a defensive magic behind him, then immediately had the giant eagle fly away with both of them. At this moment, Maxim's magic finally successfully released, but it collided with Balthazar's defensive magic, cancelling each other out. Watching the approaching train, Maxim hurriedly climbed onto the platform, staring silently at the two figures departing. Balthazar, carrying David, flew back to the building where the steel giant eagle was activated and landed on the rooftop terrace. Jumping off the giant eagle, David, still in shock, grabbed the railing and exclaimed, "This can't be real, this can't be real. It scared the hell out of me." While Balthazar was stroking the head of the steel giant eagle, he said, "Relax, David. Take a deep breath." At this moment, the steel giant eagle returned to the corner of the building's rooftop, transforming back into a decoration. Seeing this scene, David exclaimed, "What? Oh, this can't be real." Balthazar then picked up a pigeon from the ground, expressing confusion, "What's wrong? What's happening?" He sat down, cradling the pigeon. David pointed at Balthazar and shouted, "No, no, 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 no. You can't treat me like this anymore. Do you know how much I've suffered in the past 10 years? Balthazar looked at David and explained, "For the past 10 years, I've been imprisoned." David shook his head and shouted, "Me too. My mind has also been imprisoned. Do you know what they call mental illness in our hometown? If someone is mentally disturbed, they say he has David Stutler syndrome." He angrily exclaimed, "Do you know that?" Balthazar, tying a note to the pigeon's leg, said, "Listen to me, David. That nesting doll is a prison, containing the most dangerous magicians ever. Each layer of the nesting doll contains one people. Maxim has always wanted to release Morgana Le Fay from there to destroy the world, and we must not let him succeed." David nodded, "Yeah, of course." By now, Balthazar had attached the note to the pigeon and released it. Facing David, he said, "In fact, you're a person with special talents. You should understand that." David hurriedly said, "I just want to be a normal person, live a normal life. I want to forget what happened in the mysterious cabin. I want to forget about magic. I want to forget everything. I even sold that ring online." Initially indifferent to David's words, Balthazar was surprised only when David finished speaking. "You sold that ring? You actually sold that ring?" Disappointed with how David handled the dragon ring, Balthazar wondered if such a person could truly be the new Supreme Merlin. "Yes, I sold it. Just sold it today. And I am not the only person with special talents, but so is that person. He also put on that ring, just like I did back then." Balthazar exclaimed, "Impossible. It's impossible for two people to wear that ring at the same time." As he spoke, Balthazar waved his hand to summon the dragon ring but felt resistance, and the summoning failed. Muttering to himself, Balthazar said, "Someone really put it on him." Chapter 239, Can you use magic too? David explained, "It's true. At that time, I personally handed the ring to him. I saw the ring wrap around his finger just like when I was a child. I can't be mistaken about that." Balthazar looked at David and thought about Merlin's last words before his death. "Whoever wears this ring will be the new Supreme Merlin and will kill Morgana. Could there be two Supreme Merlins?" Then he spoke, "In that case, let's go meet this person recognized by the ring first and then take him to find the nesting doll." However, David refused, "No, I have my own life." Balthazar looked at David and said, "Maxim knows the nesting doll is in your hands. He won't let you go. Unless you want to let him turn you into a pig, you better follow me. After meeting the gentleman who bought the ring, help me find the nesting doll." Balthazar didn't intend to give up on David until he saw whether the buyer could actually wear the dragon ring. Just in case something went wrong, he wanted David as a backup plan. Even if the dragon ring chose a new owner, David's talent was still good. He could be trained into an excellent wizard. David looked at the situation and said, "Well, this is too much. Do you know how outrageous this is?" Balthazar glanced at David and said, "Just help me retrieve the nesting doll, and you'll be fine." David nodded in agreement. Seeing this, Balthazar waved his hand and immediately located the position of the dragon's ring. "Okay, let's go. We'll first meet the gentleman who bought the ring." Charles' agency. The training room had already been restored by the staff. Charles, with the dragon ring, was experiencing the ninjutsu in the room. After some testing, he found that the power increased by 10% when using elemental ninjutsu. One shouldn't underestimate this 10%, it often meant a significant difference in strength. However, only elemental ninjutsu could be amplified, such as fire release, wind release, lightning release, earth release, etc. Taijutsu and strength-enhancing techniques showed no change. Charles didn't understand the specific reason for this phenomenon but speculated that the dragon ring categorized such ninjutsu as magic and amplified them. Amplifying magic was, after all, the intended function of this ring. Suddenly, a force appeared on the ring, as if trying to take Charles away with the ring. "Hiya!" Charles shouted loudly, chakras surged in his body, forcibly breaking this force. At this point, that inexplicable attraction also disappeared. As he dispersed the chakra rolling on his body, Charles guessed silently, could it be that the plot had already started? Thinking that the other party should come looking for him soon, he stopped training. As for the effects of this ring, he had already discovered some, but the rest could wait for now. Whether to keep it as a ninjutsu amplifier or directly use it for charging, it depended on how the situation developed in the end. After opening the training room, Charles took a shower upstairs and then came down to the lounge area, drinking whiskey and waiting for the other party to arrive. At this time, Balthazar drove his own car, bringing David to the intersection of 71 Forest Hills Avenue, Indiana, Queens. Since the road was still closed, the two parked the car and walked to the entrance of Charles' agency. Sensing the aura of the ring, Balthazar knew that the ring's owner was inside. He spoke, "Let's go. Your buyer is inside." The doorman of the agency, seeing the two approaching, proactively opened the gate, saying, "Please come in." Entering the agency, guided by Balthazar's sense of the dragon's ring, they reached the lounge area and immediately saw Charles drinking at a booth. Following Balthazar's gaze, David also looked over and, upon seeing Charles, immediately spoke, "Yes, it's him. I sold the dragon ring to him." Balthazar then walked towards Charles and sat down in front of him. Looking at the man in front of him and seeing the dragon ring on his index finger, Balthazar pondered for a moment before saying, "Hello, sir. I am the wizard Balthazar. The dragon ring on your hand was in my possession before. I am responsible for finding its owner and teaching them magic." Charles looked at the two people in front of him, Balthazar's straightforwardness, and then smiled, saying, "David, you did well." Seeing this, David sat down next to Balthazar, looking somewhat awkwardly at Charles. After all, his actions seemed to expose the buyer's information, which was somewhat unethical. Charles extended his hand, showcasing the dragon ring on his hand, and then said, "I bought this ring from David. It is now my private possession. Is there a problem?" David preemptively said, "No problem. I've already sold it to you, and, of course, the corresponding responsibility goes to you as well." Balthazar then said, "I'm not here to reclaim the ring. I am just the guardian of this ring, responsible for finding its owner. Previously, David could wear it, but he sold it to you, and now you have become the owner of this ring. So, this ring belongs to you. I will serve you as you are now the heir of the ring, teach you magic, and help you become the new Supreme Merlin. As for what magic is..." Balthazar clasped his hands together and then let go, a ball of fire appeared in the palm of his hand, and then the flames extinguished to reveal a ball of lightning. Watching Balthazar's performance, Charles smiled. Wizards indeed had many commendable aspects and unique magic, such as the mirror world, transformation, transportation methods, and even the steel giant eagle. However, they also had many weaknesses. On the side, David, watching Balthazar's performance, had a curious expression. Was this the magic he had encountered in his childhood? At this moment, Charles extended one palm in front of everyone, and instantly, lightning flickered, the prototype of Chidori. Is this the kind of magic? Seeing the lightning in Charles's hand, Balthazar was stunned. It was different from what he had expected, and the lightning was also different from his own. On the other side, David opened his mouth wide. He didn't expect that his buyer was actually a wizard. At this moment, Balthazar felt a special fluctuation from Charles, like magic but not quite the same, yet seemingly the source of magical power. Who did you learn your magic from? Upon hearing Balthazar's words, Charles dispersed the chidori on his hand and then said, "This is not magic." Chapter 240, Action. Upon hearing Charles say that this was not magic, Balthazar frowned slightly and then asked with confusion, "Then what do you call this?" Charles smiled and responded, "This is ninjutsu." Looking at Charles's eyes, Balthazar knew that he was not lying. He then said, "Well, let's not dwell on your ninjutsu that looks like magic for now. I will be responsible for teaching you the magic that the Supreme Merlin should learn. But before that, we have something to do. Since you already have the power, let's do it together." Balthazar then explained to Charles Doyle what Morgana was, the grievances between them and the heirs of Merlin, and their current enemy, Maxim. On the other side, Maxim arrived at the location of the mysterious cabin from 10 years ago, but everything had undergone significant changes. The original mysterious cabin was long gone, replaced by an electronic shopping mall. Looking at the mall in front of him, Maxim recalled David's words, "I threw it on the street. It's been a long time, I'm afraid I won't remember." Thinking of David's words, magical power surged within Maxim, and fragments of the time segment appeared in his mind. He seemed to return to the scene from 10 years ago. Soon, he saw the young schoolboy David running out of the mysterious cabin, carrying the nesting doll, and then throwing it onto the street. Subsequently, an Asian woman picked it up. "Found you, nesting doll." Just at this moment, the headlights of a car illuminated Maxim, and the driver shouted at him, "Move, crazy person. I need to park there." The honking horn and the headlights brought Maxim back to the real world. Looking at the man in front of him, Maxim asked in confusion, "Are you talking to me?" The driver stuck his head out and shouted at Maxim, "Hey, don't mess with me." Maxim waved his wand towards the man, and 2 flying knives flew out, piercing the windshield and causing him to die on the spot. After dealing with this man who disturbed his thoughts, Maxim muttered to himself, "Where is the nesting doll?" After pondering for a moment, he said, "Chinatown." At this point, Charles had already accepted Balthazar's invitation and, along with him and David, arrived at Chinatown. Charles had developed a keen interest in the nesting doll that had imprisoned countless evil wizards. He wanted to see if it could be used for recharging. Even if it couldn't, learning this technique could be useful for imprisoning enemies. Chinatown was bustling with activity, colorful ribbons floating in the air. A large Chinese company had opened its gates, and a dragon dance team came to perform. Watching the scene in front of him, Charles felt deeply moved. It had been a long time since he had seen such performances in this world. He stopped and watched for a while. Balthazar, at this time, walked through the dragon dance team and arrived at the entrance of a store. He said, "This is it. I'll go upstairs and find the nesting doll. David, be careful of Maxim. If you see him, seek help from Charles Doyle." Then, he looked at Charles and said, "Charles, I'll leave David in your care. After all, you haven't seen Maxim." After saying that, Balthazar walked towards the upstairs traditional Chinese medicine acupuncture clinic. Seeing Charles watching the dragon dance, David spoke, "You're very interested in Chinese culture." Hearing David's words, Charles smiled and replied, "I really like it. It's a very powerful nation with a long history and culture. Despite numerous disasters and wars, they have not been defeated. Such a nation is amazing, isn't it?" David pondered for a moment. As an engineering student, he didn't know much about Chinese culture. He expressed his confusion, saying, "But they still came here and became Americans." Charles shrugged indifferently, saying, "Historical legacy issues. People always make different choices, don't they?" Hearing Charles's words, David seemed to be lost in thought but didn't say anything. Instead, they both enjoyed the dragon dance performance together. At this time, Balthazar arrived on the second floor and, through the corridor, saw a door labeled Ping and Tang Acupuncture Massage and Ping and Tang Medicinal Herbs. He walked in. Entering the shop, Balthazar reached out to sense the location of the nesting doll but got nothing. At this moment, an old woman's voice came from behind, "May I help you? Do you have an appointment?" Balthazar turned around, looking at an old woman with a cane, and said, Sorry to disturb you. I'm looking for something very special, a nesting doll, about this size. The old woman approached and said, a nesting doll? Yes, that's right. It's possible that I have it. I've collected many things over the years. Looking at the old woman looking around in front of him, Balthazar suddenly spoke in Cantonese, your hairstyle is very beautiful. Hearing Balthazar's words, the old woman turned around, surprised, and said, ah, you can speak Vietnamese. Balthazar crossed his hands, elongating the tone, and said, ah. Then, he waved his hand at the old woman, instantly sending her flying, crashing into the shop's front door and shattering the glass. Balthazar walked up to the old woman, saying, that's not Vietnamese, Maxim. At this point, the old woman touched her face and immediately transformed into Maxim's appearance. Balthazar looked at Maxim and asked, where's the nesting doll? Where is it? Maxim looked at Balthazar and said, I have a friend who speaks authentic Vietnamese. He lived 200 years ago. Do you know him? His name is Aloe. While Maxim was talking, Balthazar suddenly felt countless leaves silently gathering behind him, forming an Asian man who reached out to the acupuncture barrels on both sides. Countless silver needles silently flew out. Maxim continued speaking, capturing Balthazar's attention, you locked him in the nesting doll, but unfortunately, I released him. At this moment, an empty nesting doll lid appeared in Maxim's hands, showing it to Balthazar. Balthazar sensed that something was wrong and immediately turned to look behind him. Countless silver needles were flying towards him. Balthazar quickly pulled up his windbreaker, protecting his whole body. Balthazar's windbreaker was no ordinary item, it was also a magical object. All the flying needles were blocked by the windbreaker, leaving him unharmed. Chapter 241, Magical Items. Balthazar waved his hand towards Aloe, and an invisible energy blast directly sent him flying. Aloe happened to be leaning against the window, which he crashed through, falling from the second floor to the street below. He landed right next to David, startling him. David quickly asked the fallen man, are you okay? Seeing that he was completely unharmed, David asked, who are you? At this moment, the people around, thinking that Aloe's strange appearance was part of the performance, started applauding and cheering. Meanwhile, Charles, focused on the dragon dance, didn't pay attention to David and Aloe. David, seeing the applause, joined in and exclaimed, yeah, that was a great performance. Balthazar shouted from the broken window, David, don't just stand there, run. Hearing Balthazar's words, David quickly realized the situation and ran towards Charles. Aloe, observing this, placed his hands on the dragon-shaped decoration on his chest armor. The dragon pattern suddenly came to life. As Charles watched the dragon dance, it instantly transformed from a prop into a large lizard with wings on its back, resembling a dragon, with the performers inside it. The magical dragon emitted a dragon roar, causing panic among the spectators who scattered in all directions. Adhering to the principle that magic should not be visible to the public, Balthazar waved his hands, creating countless colored papers to cover the magical dragon, preventing those on the periphery from seeing what was happening inside. The crowd instinctively followed others and fled in different directions. After briefly concealing the magical dragon, Balthazar turned around and looked into the room. At this moment, Maxim was hiding behind the wall with a curtain hanging behind him. Unaware of the curtain's transformation, Maxim, prepared to ambush, suddenly found the curtain's tassels entangling his neck, pulling him in front of Balthazar. Balthazar manipulated magic with both hands and said, quiet. A chain wrapped around Maxim's legs, another entangled his left hand holding the wand, and one more went into his embrace, taking away the nesting doll and handing it to Balthazar. Balthazar got the nesting doll and ignored Maxim. He turned to the window and jumped down. He had to deal with Aloe and the magical dragon. Although he knew Charles had some power, mastering a magic called ninjutsu, he didn't know the specific strength and couldn't let the Merlin heir get into trouble. On the other side, David ran up to Charles, grabbing his arm and shouting in panic, Dragon, dragon. Charles slapped away David's arm and calmly said, that's not a dragon, it's a lizard. The dragon dance, originally an Eastern dragon, had turned into a Western-style magical dragon, disappointing Charles. It would have been better if it were a mythical creature like the Kunlun beast, then he could have used it for recharging or extending his life. Charles patted David's shoulder and said, take care of your safety. I'll go deal with this big lizard. With a leap, Charles's figure appeared directly above the magical dragon's head, and he delivered a powerful kick. A downward kick struck the dragon's head forcefully. Boom! The tremendous force caused the standing magical dragon to instantly stretch out its limbs, lying flat on the ground. Its head smashed directly into the ground, creating a deep pit. However, Charles's powerful kick did not result in a head explosion effect. He couldn't help but exclaim, "The defense is quite high." Charles then sat on the dragon's head, grabbed one of its horns, and yanked it hard. Crack! A dragon horn was directly snapped off. The magical dragon roared in pain. At the same time, the dragon horn on Aloe's chest armor also broke. As Aloe touched the broken dragon horn on the dragon-shaped ornament, it instantly restored to normal. Meanwhile, the dragon horn on the dragon head under Charles's feet grew back. Seeing this change, Charles immediately sensed that something was wrong. He turned his head and looked into the distance. With his Sharingan eyes, the colored papers that obstructed his vision was no longer an obstacle. At a glance, he identified Aloe in the middle of the road. Seeing that it was Aloe causing trouble, Charles fiercely kicked the dragon's head beneath him, sending it into the deep pit in the ground. Swoosh! The next moment, Charles's figure flashed, appearing directly in front of Aloe. Aloe, who hadn't reacted yet, suddenly saw a kunao in front of him. His field of vision suddenly rose, and he saw Charles's figure in a headless corpse. With Aloe's head dropping to the ground and his body losing breath, he fell backward. As he died, the dragon controlled by him lost the infusion of magic, returning to being a dragon dance prop. Looking at Aloe's leather armor and the dragon-shaped ornament, Charles tore them off and grabbed them in his hands. Ding! Discovery of rechargeable item. Would you like to recharge? Hearing the system's prompt, Charles discovered that this magical item could also be recharged. At this moment, Balthazar arrived at Charles's side, patting him on the back and saying, "Great, you're very strong." Balthazar glanced at the item in Charles's hand and then said, "Put it away, it's your spoils of war." Charles nodded, and with a wave of his hand, this magical item entered Charles's storage space. Seeing this scene, Balthazar was surprised and said, "Space magic? It's a very practical magic." David, who had run over after the danger had passed, came to Balthazar and recounted everything he had just seen. On the second-floor windowsill, Maxim also released Balthazar's control, stretched out his head to look down, and saw David, Balthazar, and Charles. Seeing the three people in front of him, Maxim frowned. Who was the other person? The sharp-eyed Maxim then saw the dragon ring on Charles's finger and, with an unbelieving expression, said, "This can't be." Then, realizing he couldn't handle it alone, he fled the scene. Watching David incessantly talk, Balthazar took out the nesting doll from his bosom. When he saw the image on the nesting doll was his beloved, he felt a bit sentimental. Charles, who had been observing, was also attracted by this object. At this moment, 2 police cars with blaring sirens arrived. Seeing this, Charles spoke, "We should leave." Then the 3 of them walked outside and got into Balthazar's car, heading towards Charles's agency. In the car, Balthazar said to David, "You've done well, since the owner of the ring is now Charles, your mission is over." As the car drove away, Maxim, who had escaped, watched from a distance. He couldn't believe that the dragon ring was now on Charles's finger. Chapter 242, Magical Grimoire. Upon hearing Balthazar's words, David didn't immediately agree. Instead, he recalled the powerful abilities Charles had demonstrated earlier. Filled with an infinite desire, he pondered for a moment before speaking, "I want to learn magic." Balthazar's lips curled into a slight smile as he turned to Charles sitting in the back seat, asking, "Do you have a place for learning magic?" "No problem, my agency has enough space for learning," Charles replied. With a snap of his fingers, Balthazar said, "Let's go." The car started, heading towards Charles' agency. On the other side, Selene led Team Kakashi to the location where William was imprisoned, following the memories obtained from Marcus. Sasuke, puzzled, asked, "Why not go after the vampires? Why bother with this so-called werewolf progenitor, William?" In a cold tone, Kakashi said, "Lady Tsunade ordered us to bring him back for experiments." Hearing it's Tsunade's orders, Sasuke didn't question further. He simply twirled the silver kunao in his hand. Meanwhile, Rock Lee flexed his wrists and ankles. He didn't care whether the enemies were werewolves or vampires, as long as he didn't get bitten, such injuries were negligible to him. Naruto, on the other hand, watched everything with curiosity. I'm going to open William's cage. Selene reminded everyone before inserting the key obtained from Alexander into the switch on the wall and turning it slowly. In the next moment, the sound of mechanical gears and chains echoed. A steel-sealed iron cocoon was opened, revealing the imprisoned giant wolf inside. Seeing this giant wolf, even larger than any werewolf he had ever seen, Selene muttered, "William! Howl!" William opened his blood-stained mouth and let out a roar. Finally released after centuries of captivity, he was free again. Released from his cage, William walked toward Selene with heavy steps. With each step, his massive body caused the ground to tremble. Every step he took was accompanied by a significant noise. Seeing the approaching giant wolf William, Selene shouted, "Stop!" However, William paid no attention to Selene's shouts. He swung a claw towards her, and Selene narrowly avoided it with a risky backflip. Watching this, Kakashi didn't say anything. He flashed to the front of William, delivering a powerful side kick to the wolf's head. Bang! William was directly kicked, crashing into the wall next to the passage as his entire body got embedded into it. Dust fell as William howled in pain. One of his claws grabbed the edge of the wall. He crawled out, seemingly battered, but he appeared to have suffered no serious injuries. Just as William was preparing to launch an attack on everyone, Kakashi, holding a white short sword, appeared above him. A downward strike from above pierced through William's back, instantly causing him to collapse. Kakashi avoided William's heart during this strike, not killing him. However, he severed the spine, making him lose all combat capability. In just 2 moves, Kakashi subdued William, the werewolf progenitor. Then, looking at Sasuke and the others behind him, he spoke up, "Tie him up with iron chains." Hearing Kakashi's orders, Rock Lee quickly took out a long iron chain from his ninja pouch, ready to bind William. Selene and Michael, however, walked over and said, "Let us do it." Taking the iron chain from Rock Lee, Selene and Michael proceeded to tie up William. Seeing William securely bound, Kakashi clapped his hands together, and then slammed them onto the ground, using a summoning jutsu. Bang! As the smoke cleared, Bull, the Hellhound, emerged. Seeing the exaggerated size of Bull, both Selene and Michael were taken aback. Bull looked around at everyone and then said to Kakashi, "Kakashi, why did you summon me?" Kakashi, holding the chain attached to William, replied, "Bull, I need you to take care of this guy and bring him back to the summoning world for detention. Leave it to me." Bull walked up to Kakashi, bit the chain in his hand, and then dispelled the summoning jutsu, transporting himself and William back to the summoning world. Watching this scene, Selene and Michael were wide-eyed in amazement. Michael exclaimed, "What is the summoning world? Is it another world?" Kakashi glanced at the two but didn't bother to explain. He sheathed the short sword back into its scabbard on his back, his voice cold as he said, "Don't waste time here. It's time to find the vampires." At this moment, Lee, being kind-hearted, approached Michael and explained the concept of the summoning world. Selene, without further delay, led everyone out of the prison where William was held and headed towards the direction of the Nordic branch. On the other side, Charles, along with Balthazar and David, returned to the agency and entered the training room. "This training room should be enough for you, Balthazar." Balthazar looked around the training room, nodded in satisfaction, and then placed the nesting doll on a nearby table. Once placed on the table, the nesting doll disappeared as if it had turned invisible. Observing this, Charles verified the table again and confirmed that there was indeed no nesting doll on it. Sharingan, activate. With the activation of the Sharingan, the magic covering the nesting doll, which had previously concealed itself from Charles, was now seen through by the Sharingan. However, Charles didn't dispel the magic. After closing the Sharingan, the nesting doll remained invisible, as if it had never appeared. Noting the change in Charles's eyes, Balthazar observed but didn't comment. Instead, he addressed Charles and David, saying, "Now, I will take out the magical grimoire and teach you the magic it contains." Balthazar pulled out a book from his pocket, a miniature version no larger than a spice packet. Seeing this, Charles smiled without speaking, while David, gesturing with his hands, commented, "I thought this thing should be much larger. About this size." Balthazar chuckled, "This is a pocket edition." As Balthazar unfolded the magical grimoire, its size returned to the size that David had indicated earlier. Charles, observing this scene, fell into contemplation. Was this material folding or some other technique? To be able to make an item smaller for convenient carrying. It gave him a hint of PIM particles, yet it was entirely different. Chapter 243, Ancient One appears. Balthazar opened the magic book and said, "See, this is the two of you." On the page that was opened, there were not only the portraits of David and Charles Doyle, but also illustrations of Aloe and Maxim. Balthazar handed the magic book to Charles. "Take a look." Charles took it without hesitation and started flipping through it. At this point, Balthazar walked towards the center of the training room, then held his breath, slowly raised his hands, and then slammed them to the ground. A circular green flame soared into the sky. David was shocked and shouted, interrupting Charles, who was reading the history of magic. As Balthazar's movements continued, the flame slowly descended, drawing a magic array on the ground. After completing the magic array, Balthazar said, "This is the Merlin magic circle. It can be used to gather your power and help you master new spells. It's also the place for you to learn skills." After speaking, Balthazar walked out and raised another Merlin magic circle in the open space, one prepared for Charles and one for David. "Come in, don't bring anything but yourselves. Once inside, you are not allowed to go out until you have mastered the power." David thought for a moment and said, "Then I'll go to the restroom first to avoid any inconvenience later." Then David turned to Charles and asked, "Where is the bathroom?" Seeing David's embarrassed look, Charles smiled and said, "Ask the waiter when you go out, he will take you there." "Thank you." After saying that, David walked outside the practice room. Charles glanced at the magic book in his hand, then looked at Balthazar standing in the magic array, and suddenly asked out of curiosity, "What is the difference between the Merlin sorcerers and the secret sorcerers of Comitage?" As Charles's words fell, Balthazar's figure appeared in front of him like a phantom. "Where did you learn about Comitage?" Charles shrugged and didn't say anything, just looking at Balthazar, waiting for his answer. "Okay, I don't care where you learned about Comitage, but let me tell you one thing, don't learn their magic. Our Merlin lineage primarily discovers individuals who already have a source of magical power and immense energy. We cultivate those with inherent potential into powerful sorcerers. In our lineage, the power is inherent, and while talent itself may be the biggest limitation, the lifespan is long, and there is no need to pay any additional cost in the future. The biggest difference between the Merlin lineage and the Comitage lineage is that the mages of Comitage do not rely on their own magic. Instead, they choose to sign contracts with other powerful beings to borrow power. This opportunistic method requires a huge price, especially in old age. Except for their leader, the Sorcerer Supreme, each of them has a short." Balthazar's words were not finished when suddenly a light circle appeared next to him, and a bald woman walked out. She was none other than the Sorcerer Supreme, the Ancient One. "Mage Balthazar, speaking ill of others behind their backs is not a good habit." Looking at the woman who walked out of the portal, Balthazar smiled awkwardly and then respectfully said, "Good evening, Sorcerer Supreme." The Ancient One, in response to Balthazar's newfound respect, also greeted him, "Good evening, Archmage Balthazar." Then the Ancient One turned to look at Charles Doyle, and her gaze lingered for a moment on the dragon ring on Charles's index finger before she spoke. "Mage Balthazar, are you planning to pass on the position of the Supreme Merlin to Mr. Charles Doyle?" Both Charles and Balthazar were somewhat puzzled by the sudden appearance of the Ancient One, especially when the position of the Supreme Merlin was mentioned. In the magical world, there is not only the title of Sorcerer Supreme, but also the position of Supreme Merlin. However, the Supreme Merlin has always belonged to Merlin lineage. After his death, for more than a dozen centuries, Balthazar did not find a suitable successor, and the position remained vacant. Today, the Sorcerer Supreme suddenly asked this question, and Balthazar frowned slightly. Then he slowly said, "This is an affair of my Merlin lineage and should not fall under the jurisdiction of the Sorcerer Supreme, right?" The Ancient One spoke gently, "Don't misunderstand. I won't interfere with the inheritance of the Supreme Merlin lineage. I just want to understand it briefly." Upon hearing the Ancient One's words, Balthazar then said, "The Dragon Ring has chosen Charles. He will be the next Supreme Merlin." At this moment, the Ancient One looked through the door of the room, as if she saw David going to the restroom, and shook her head slightly, saying, "Poor guy, I wonder if, when he finds out that he sold the position of Supreme Merlin for only $100,000 in the future, he will regret his choice." Then the Ancient One looked at Charles and said, "Charles Doyle, after you inherit the position of the Supreme Merlin, come to Comitage. I have something to explain to you. After all, now that the Supreme Merlin has returned to his position, the responsibilities he originally had should return to him, not me, right? Upon hearing the Ancient One's words, Charles's expression became serious. He originally thought this was just a ninjutsu-enhancing artifact, but he didn't expect it to be a hot potato. As for letting Charles give up the dragon ring and give the position of Supreme Merlin to David, he couldn't do it. Something he bought with money will always be his. The task of the Sorcerer Supreme is to guard the earth, but what about the task of the Supreme Merlin? Although Charles doesn't know exactly what it is, he can guess some. In any case, when his strength improves in the future, he will go to other dimensions to plant divine trees. He also wants to try if those magical beings can be used for recharging. With a solemn nod, Charles spoke, I understand, Master Ancient One. After getting Charles's answer, the Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One did not say anything more. She stepped into the portal and left. Charles and Balthazar watched Ancient One, the Sorcerer Supreme, leave. After she left, the two looked at each other and saw a hint of solemnity in each other's eyes. Master Balthazar, take advantage of the fact that we haven't started learning magic yet. Can you explain the story of Supreme Merlin? Balthazar nodded and then walked over, picking up the magic book from Charles's hand. He then slowly began to tell the story. Chapter 244, Supreme Merlin. In ancient times, a war broke out among sorcerers, and the venerable Merlin eventually gained control over the fate of humanity. He shared his secrets with his three most trusted apprentices, Balthazar, Veronica, and Maxim. However, one of them betrayed him. Balthazar and Veronica witnessed the brutality of that super-evil sorcerer. Morgana Le Fay, she was Merlin's mortal enemy. In their decisive battle, Maxim betrayed Merlin, launching a sneak attack on our mentor, leading to his defeat. Thus, Morgana obtained the most dangerous magical spell in Merlin's Mage Tower, commonly known as the Resurrection Spell. From then on, she had the power to build an army of the undead and subjugate humanity. In my hurried arrival, I was struck down by Morgana, and Veronica sacrificed herself to save me. She absorbed Morgana's soul into her own body, but Morgana attempted to kill Veronica. To save Veronica and subdue Morgana, I imprisoned them both in a set of nested dolls, a prison resembling a matryoshka. For years, I defeated many sorcerers who came to rescue Morgana, locking them layer by layer into the nested dolls, and finally, Maxim was also captured by me. As Merlin approached his end, he handed his dragon ring to Balthazar, telling him that the ring would help him find Merlin's future successor, the Supreme Merlin. Supreme Merlin is the only one capable of killing Morgana. I searched for many centuries and meeting countless people, but none could put on this ring. It wasn't until 10 years ago when I encountered David, who put on the dragon ring. However, inadvertently, he released Maxim. And now, 10 years later, David has relinquished the ring, and you have successfully put on the dragon ring. Listening to Balthazar's narrative, Charles curiously asked, Resurrection spell? Is it a true resurrection without consequences? Regarding the resurrection spell, Charles was very interested. Although there was a form of resurrection in Naruto, it often came with a hefty cost. Balthazar looked deeply at Charles Doyle, then spoke, I have not seen the resurrection spell. Even Morgana did not have the chance to learn it before I sealed her into the nested dolls. But to gain something, one must inevitably give something. Just like magic, the magnitude of magical power determines the potency of the spell. And for a spell as profound as resurrection, the cost of casting it must be exceptionally significant. Charles nodded in agreement, acknowledging Balthazar's words, then asked, what is the responsibility of Supreme Merlin? Balthazar pondered for a moment before answering, Supreme Merlin, like the Sorcerer Supreme, is tasked with protection. The Sorcerer Supreme guards the earth, primarily preventing the invasion of powerful beings from other dimensions. Supreme Merlin, on the other hand, governs the sorcerers, safeguarding human safety, eliminating evil sorcerers, and clearing out some deviant bloodlines. Of course, similar to the Sorcerer Supreme, he must also prevent dimensional invasions, but that is not the Supreme Merlin's main task. The secrets of Camartage do not belong to sorcerers and are not under the jurisdiction of Supreme Merlin. Looking at Charles's curiosity, Balthazar spoke, of course, if you are interested in the title of Sorcerer Supreme, you can compete for it after Ancient One retires. The owner of Supreme Merlin can, under certain conditions, concurrently hold the title of Sorcerer Supreme. However, I do not recommend you do so. After all, to become Sorcerer Supreme, you need to establish a relationship with that person. Our lineage derives power from within, while the Sorcerer Supreme lineage relies on external forces. Although Balthazar did not directly mention the person's name, Charles understood who it was: the 3-in-1 Vishanti. They would periodically organize a tournament among the top sorcerers. The one who could stand until the end would undoubtedly become the Sorcerer Supreme. However, when Ancient One was alive, Vishanti did not organize such competitions, as no one could match Ancient One. But after Ancient One passed the title to Dr. Stephen Strange, Vishanti didn't hesitate to hold these competitions. Even Loki from another universe had experienced the thrill of being Sorcerer Supreme. After pondering for a moment, Charles spoke, "I have no intention of holding the title of Sorcerer Supreme." Just as Charles finished speaking, David, who had just finished relieving himself, pushed the door open and walked in. Looking at Balthazar and Charles, he said apologetically, "Sorry to keep you waiting." David walked up to Balthazar and nodded at him, then said, "I'm ready." Balthazar nodded back at David and then said to Charles, "Charles, David, enter these 2 Merlin magic circles." Charles and David walked into the Merlin magic circles prepared by Balthazar. At this moment, Balthazar stood in front of the 2, with a solemn expression, and said, "I am Balthazar Blake, a 777 Th Master of Magic. Now, I am taking you 2 as my apprentices. Charles is my first disciple, and David, you are the second." Charles did not refuse Balthazar's offer. Although he didn't really need magic, learning some magical skills wouldn't hurt. After all, certain magical skills could be quite practical. David, on the other hand, was somewhat excited and happily said, "That's great." At this moment, Balthazar waved his hand, and once again, a ring appeared in his hand. It wasn't the dragon ring representing Supreme Merlin, but an ordinary magic ring. He looked at David and then threw the ring over. "David, put on this magic ring." David received the ring, looked at the item in his hand, and then glanced at the one he had sold to Charles. He thought to himself, "I didn't lose out. I sold one and got another, essentially picking up $100,000 for free." At this point, Balthazar stood in front of the 2, speaking with a serious tone, "Your rings are not just accessories. They are used to help the magical energy within your bodies enter the material world. The ring is like a sorcerer's wand, a mystic's talisman. It is a powerful weapon for casting spells and also a unique item of the Merlin lineage. Without the ring, most sorcerers will lose the ability to cast spells. However, some exceptional individuals can still cast spells without the ring, just like my teacher, Merlin." Chapter 245, Magic and Dragon Ring, Bonus Chapter. Inside the Charles Agency. Balthazar continued explaining, "I'm sure you've heard that humans only use about 10% of their brain capacity, right? Sorcerers, on the other hand, are capable of anything because they naturally have the ability to use their entire brain. This also explains why molecular physics is so simple for you, David." Curious, David asked, "Really? So, is this science or magic?" Balthazar replied, "It's a bit of both. What you are about to learn now is basic combat spells, specifically, creating flames. What causes molecules to heat up?" David quickly answered, "Is it vibration? We see everything in the world constantly vibrating. Therefore, stability is just an illusion. How do we turn that apparent stability into flames? We must find a way to accelerate the vibration. The first step, clear your mind. The second step, see the molecules. The third step, make them vibrate." While explaining, Balthazar waved his hand towards a nearby table, instantly setting it ablaze. After completing these actions, Balthazar looked at the 2 and said, "Do you understand?" David, bewildered, asked, "What did you say?" Balthazar raised his right hand, adorned with the ring, and said, "Believe in the ring." Charles, thoughtful, nodded and then focused, feeling the chakra energy within his body. The chakra flowed into the ring, and the next moment, a flame appeared in his hand. With a wave of his hand, the flame flew towards a nearby chair. Balthazar, watching this scene, was highly satisfied with Charles's performance. With one explanation and one demonstration, Charles learned it instantly. Truly deserving to be the future Supreme Merlin. Then he looked at David, who seemed bewildered, thinking to himself, "These 2 seeds of the Supreme Merlin, the difference is indeed very vast." Charles, feeling the magical flame, had an idea. He gathered a large amount of chakra in his abdomen. Fire release, great fireball technique. This time, Charles didn't perform hand seals but instead followed the usual chakra mobilization steps for the great fireball. He also activated the dragon ring. However, he noticed that the ninjutsu was not enhanced. A massive fireball spewed from Charles's mouth. Its diameter was so large that it almost reached Balthazar, who was standing outside the Merlin magic circle. Balthazar clapped his hands, and a massive vacuum shield enveloped Charles's fireball. He intended to extinguish the flames by isolating oxygen but found that it was not successful. Before Charles's chakra burned out, the flames did not go out. Balthazar then cast another spell, replacing the vacuum shield with a water ball. The water met the fire, generating a large amount of steam but also extinguishing the flames Charles had produced. As the steam dispersed, Balthazar looked at Charles with even greater satisfaction. After giving Charles and David some guidance on learning magic, Balthazar let them continue practicing. On the other side, Maxim arrived at a familiar fast food restaurant. The chef, currently grilling steaks, found a star-shaped magic pattern suddenly appeared on the steak. He looked outside, coincidentally spotting Maxim standing there. The chef put down his spatula and walked out, coming to Maxim's side. He pointed at Maxim's wand with excitement, saying, "I saw a picture of that wand when I was young. It seems you've been locked up for a long time." Maxim looked at the chef with graying hair and said, "I am free now. I need an assistant." The chef raised one finger and said, "I have a candidate who will satisfy you. Go find him." Through prolonged practice, David also mastered basic combat spells. Currently, David was dressed in anti-electricity protective gear, looking like a ninja turtle. Charles couldn't help but laugh at the sight, grateful he didn't need to wear such attire. "Teacher, why doesn't the eldest senior brother need to wear this set? I think everyone should be treated equally." Charles shrugged, and then his hands sparkled with lightning. Seeing this, David immediately closed his mouth. Balthazar held a sparkling plasma ball in his hand while walking and continued, "David, your intelligence and willpower can help you learn magic faster or become a magic apprentice. Now, I'll teach you a move, a killer move that can defeat Morgana in a critical situation, a secret weapon. Plasma lightning." As he spoke, Balthazar directly shot the plasma lightning in his hand towards a nearby chair, instantly shattering it into pieces. Seemingly aware of Charles's dissatisfaction with the power, Balthazar explained, "The power of this move mainly depends on your own magical power. The more magical power you output and the higher its quality, the greater the power. I found that your thunder jutsu requires hand seals to activate, while this move is instant." For this, Balthazar even demonstrated it again, showing multiple starlight lightning balls instantly appearing in his hand and shooting out in all directions. Watching Balthazar's demonstration, Charles thought to himself, "Instant activation? Someday, I'll just clap my hands and shout something." With the dragon ring, instant activation wasn't impossible, but it meant choosing between instant activation and enhanced power. On the other hand, David was amazed at the scene before him. Starting the process of creating plasma lightning on his own, he encountered continuous difficulties. Either the lightning was too small, or he couldn't shoot it out, or it was uncontrollable. David thus spent the night practicing in the training room. Meanwhile, Charles, having mastered plasma lightning, returned to his room to watch the history of magicians, leaving Balthazar to supervise David's learning. The next day, following the address given by the chef, Maxim arrived at a building and entered the top floor through magic. Opening the door with his wand, Maxim heard a man talking eloquently. In the entrance corridor hung a portrait of a magician, and the walls displayed posters of Drakestone's magic performances. Below the posters were various awards: 2007, Magician of the Year, Drakestone; 2006, Magician of the Year, Drakestone; 2005, Magician of the Year, Drakestone. Maxim furrowed his brow at everything before him, then walked into the living room, where he saw Drakestone surrounded by 7 or 8 women. Some were cleaning for him, others were doing his nails, and some were feeding him fruit. Chapter 246, Merlin above all. Maxim looked at the scene before him and said, "Oh, you must be joking." At this moment, all the beautiful women looked at this suddenly appearing man in surprise. Drakestone frowned and said, "I'm sorry, are you lost?" Maxim looked at the man in front of him and said seriously, "It seems you must be the contemporary successor of the Morgana." Drakestone extended his hand in surprise, pointing at the man in front of him, and exclaimed, "Maxim Horvath, you're a terrifying Maxim interrupted Drake Stone and said, "Please step aside, ladies." Hearing this, Drake also realized, got up, and said to the beautiful women, "Sorry, ladies." Then he looked at Maxim and apologized, "Sorry." Maxim, holding his wand, stood on the side and slowly said, "So, they told me you're a so-called big star." Drake Stone proudly said, "My shows are always sold out. Besides, there's a considerable TV broadcast fee." Maxim, impatient, raised his wand, and a magical force directly hit the sofa next to Drake, turning it into powder, startling Drake. Then Maxim angrily said, "When have you seen Morgana pull a rabbit out of her hat?" Drake also shouted angrily, "Listen, my master disappeared when I was 15, nowhere to be seen. He left me only a book of magic secrets, so I can only act according to circumstances." Hearing the explanation, Maxim took off his hat, then said, "The era of playing around ends now. Balthazar Blake may have found the Supreme Merlin." Drake was surprised, did he put on the ring? Yes. On the other side, Charles Doyle just woke up from bed. After spending half the night watching the history of magicians, he gained a deeper understanding of this esoteric profession. Check-in. Ding. Check-in successful, get Ninja Recruitment Scroll X1. Ding. VIP Level 5, get Extra Ninja Recruitment Scroll X1. Hearing that it was 2 Ninja Recruitment Scrolls, Charles felt like he struck gold. This was equivalent to 336 gold coins. Today's check-in benefits were really great. Indeed, a beautiful day started with the system check-in. Entering the system space, Charles first checked the task gathering place and found that 3 C-level tasks had been completed. Clicked in to check the task log, and it turned out to be the task done by Shizuan with Niji. Charles nodded satisfactorily, then collected the task rewards. Complete C-level task, get rewards, 500 prestige, 50,000 copper coins, 1 common treasure chest. Complete C-level task, get rewards, 500 prestige, 50,000 copper coins, 1 common treasure chest. Complete C-level task, get rewards, 500 prestige, 50,000 copper coins, 1 common treasure chest. After collecting all the rewards, Charles directly opened the shopping mall interface. He wanted to see if there were suitable fragments. The System Mall's ninja interface was opened, introducing 4 ninjas. The avatars appeared before his eyes. Shippuden Kankuro, daily limit 0/4, gold 80/1 piece. Cursed Seal Kimimaro fragments, daily limit 0/4, gold 180/1 piece. Deodara, daily limit 0/4, gold 480/1 piece. Shippuden Naruto fragments, daily limit 0/4, gold 80/1 piece. Looking at the 4 new ninjas that had just refreshed, Charles felt like buying all of them. Each ninja had significant utility. However, he checked his gold balance and found he only had 11,804 coins left. It seemed like he needed to speed up the acquisition of energy cubes, or he wouldn't have enough for his daily expenses. He clicked on Deodara's avatar, showing he already had 8 fragments. Without hesitation, Charles spent 1,920 gold coins to purchase 4 more fragments, bringing the total to 12. Next, he clicked on Shippuden Naruto's avatar. With 7 fragments in possession, he directly spent 320 gold coins to purchase 4 more fragments, reaching a total of 11. Encountering Curse Seal Kimimaro in the refreshed list, he didn't want to miss out. Spending 720 gold coins, he bought 4 more fragments, bringing the total to 8. In the blink of an eye, Charles had spent 2,960 gold coins. Looking at the remaining 8,844 coins, he thought for a moment. Eventually, he spent another 320 gold coins to buy 4 fragments of Shippuden Kankuro. After spending 320 gold coins, Charles had 8,524 gold coins left. He decided not to spend more and checked his other resources. He had 5 ninja recruitment scrolls, 11 ninjutsu scrolls, 12 common treasure chests, and 2 exquisite treasure chests. Seeing these saved resources, Charles realized he had more than 10 ninjutsu scrolls and common treasure chests. He decided to try his luck and open some boxes and scrolls today. After a simple morning routine, Charles sat on the bed, ready to draw some rewards, starting with opening a box. Common treasure chests could randomly give copper coins, prestige, gold coins, C/B ninja fragments, or recruitment scrolls. Charles extended his right hand, wearing the dragon ring. He chanted, "May Grand Master Merlin above bless this soon-to-be Supreme Merlin's apprentice with good luck and success in all endeavors." Ordinary treasure chest, 10 draws, open. The chest emitted a dazzling light. After a sparkling display, the results appeared before Charles. Ding! Obtained Ninja Recruitment Scroll X1. Ding! Obtained 60 Prestige. Ding! Obtained Rank C Ninja, Tamari's Fragment X1. Ding! Obtained Rank B Ninja, Shippuden Sakura's Fragment X1. Ding! Obtained Rank C Ninja, Uzumaki Naruto's Fragment X1. Ding! Obtained 60 gold coins. Ding! Obtained 10,000 copper coins. Ding! Obtained Rank C Ninja, Kankuro's Fragment X1. Ding! Obtained Rank B Ninja, Shippuden Naruto's Fragment X1. Ding! Obtained 15,000 copper coins. Looking at the information displayed on the screen, Charles quickly scanned it. He first confirmed if there were any recruitment scrolls and found that, out of the 10 slots, he indeed got one. Moreover, it was in the first position. This exhilarated Charles. Yes. As expected of Grand Master Merlin, the effect of his debut is quite good. I've become super lucky. Now, let's see the rest. Charles then examined his loot from this box opening. 5 ninja fragments, including 2 B-rank ones, Shippuden Sakura and Uzumaki Naruto. This progress brought him closer to recruiting Shippuden Naruto. As for C-rank fragments, he received Tamari, Kankuro, and another for Naruto. Charles was quite satisfied with this box opening. After evaluating his haul, Charles decided to proceed with another box opening. He needed to spend his resources wisely and conserve some for future needs. Chapter 247, Mystical Palm Technique. Even the C-rank ninja Naruto, who had learned the Raise Nan, was only 5 fragments away from completion. The day of assembling him was not far off. As for the remaining rewards, there were 60 gold coins, 60 prestige, and 25,000 copper coins. Taking advantage of his current good luck, Charles decided to continue and open ninja art scrolls. Currently, he had stored 12 ninja art scrolls. Today, he intended to open all of them, hoping to get 1 or 2 new skills, preferably the mystical palm technique or genjutsu. 10 consecutive ninja art scrolls, open. The ninja art scrolls in his backpack emitted a dazzling light, transforming into individual ninja art fragments before Charles. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Summoning, Shuriken Shield, Ninja Art Fragment X1. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Lightning Release, Lightning Strike, Ninja Art Fragment X3. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Water Release, Water Surge, Ninja Art Fragment X1. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Genjutsu, Illusionary Area, Ninja Art Fragment X1. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Mystical Palm Technique, Ninja Art Fragment X1. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Earth Release, Falling Rock, Ninja Art Fragment X1. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Water Release, Water Control, Ninja Art Fragment X2. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Wind Release, Air Slash, Ninja Art Fragment X1. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Mystical Palm Technique, Ninja Art Fragment X3. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Water Release, Water Surge, Ninja Art Fragment X1. Looking at the subtitles popping up on the screen and the consecutive Ninja Art Fragment information, after collecting all the fragments, Charles didn't immediately check but continued to click on the remaining 2 Ninja Art Scrolls. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Genjutsu, Illusionary Area, Ninja Art Fragment X1. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Lightning Release, Lightning Strike, Ninja Art Fragment X1. After using all the Ninja Art Scrolls, Charles began to check his harvest. Perhaps due to becoming the successor of the Supreme Merlin, the results of harvest using the scrolls were exceptionally ideal this time. 12 Ninja Art Scrolls yielded 17 Ninja Art Fragments, covering various elements like Earth Release, Wind Release, Water Release, Lightning Release, Genjutsu, and Medical Ninjutsu. Notably, Charles finally got Mystical Palm Technique, something he had been yearning for. This could significantly aid Tsunade and Shizune in their medical abilities. Although they couldn't fully recover to their peak, it provided substantial assistance in treating injuries and illnesses. After consolidating all the ninja art fragments, Charles opened the scroll inventory. Currently, the skills displayed in the inventory were Body Flicker Technique, Mastery Level 2, Ninjutsu, Wrath Level 1, Ninja Art, Shuriken Manipulation Level 1, and Earth Release, Ground Quake Level 1. This time, from the 4 mystical palm technique fragments, combined with the 1 fragment obtained previously, he had just enough to synthesize the basic skill. Without hesitation, Charles clicked on the synthesis. Ding! Successfully obtained Medical Ninjutsu Mystical Palm Technique Level 1. Mystical Palm Technique. By outputting chakra from the palm, you can enhance the healing ability of wounds or afflicted areas, a medical ninjutsu. The chakra output needs to be adjusted based on the severity of the disease. Additionally, excessive chakra output can disrupt the normal circulatory system in the patient, causing them to fall into a coma. Not only for external injuries, but it is also effective in treating internal diseases. Note, the higher the level of the ninjutsu, the better the healing effect. After seeing the introduction of mystical palm technique, Charles nodded in satisfaction. With the healing ability, combined with the medical techniques of the 2 medical ninjas and the rejuvenating effects of the wax bath, he no longer had to worry about minor injuries. Moreover, now that he had learned mystical palm technique, he could provide emergency healing for himself if he got injured. After obtaining the mystical palm technique, Charles turned his attention to the second skill that could be synthesized, Lightning Release, Lightning Strike. This skill also had 4 ninja art fragments this time, combined with the 1 obtained previously, allowing Charles to directly synthesize it. He clicked on the synthesis. Ding! Successfully obtained Lightning Release, Lightning Strike LV1. Lightning Release, Lightning Strike, summons a lightning bolt to strike the enemy. If it fails to kill the enemy, it will paralyze them for 2 seconds. Charles nodded in satisfaction at gaining another Lightning Release ninjutsu. Although this time the secret scroll opening did not yield other ninjutsu attributes or genjutsu, Charles was still very happy. Lightning Release supplemented his long-range attack capabilities, while Mystical Palm Technique enhanced his survival abilities. Charles's ninja art scroll skills were now increased to 6. Just as Charles received the 2 skills, Tsunade, who was in the laboratory researching the secrets of the Alexander bloodline, suddenly discovered that the mystical palm technique she had forgotten about had returned and could be used normally. She thought to herself, Charles's strength seems to have increased again. Then, Tsunade stretched lazily. Having spent the whole day in the laboratory, it seemed like it was time to go back to her room and get some rest. Meanwhile, Shizuan, who was on a mission with Niji, also paused for a moment. Then, she directly used the mystical palm technique and exclaimed, "My mystical palm technique is finally back. Fantastic!" At this moment, Charles, who had just received 2 new skills, exited the system space. The doorbell rang just as he got out. Opening the door, he found his secretary Ginny waiting outside. Ginny said, "Boss, get ready. We need to go to the press conference now. The video of your battle with Abomination has been completely exposed. Many media outlets are already waiting outside the agency and Stark Industries. Now, we need to give an answer at the press conference. Should we conceal the information or admit it?" After a moment of contemplation, Charles thought that there was no need to hide anything, especially since this matter had likely already been exposed to those who were paying attention. He said directly, "All right, let's go to the press conference now. We'll admit the information. There's no need to hide it." Charles put on his suit and followed Ginny downstairs. He glanced at the training room's door before turning to Ginny and said, "Wait for me a moment." At this time, in the training room, Balthazar had been teaching David throughout the night. They were currently discussing the interactions and counteractions of magic elements. David threw a fireball towards Balthazar. Balthazar opened his hands, and a vacuum shield instantly appeared, enveloping the flames David had thrown. The best way to defend against fire is a vacuum shield. Now, it's your turn. As the flames extinguished, a flame ignited in Balthazar's hands. He then blew it, and it flew directly towards David. David was about to say that he hadn't learned it yet when he saw the flame coming. He quickly followed Balthazar's movements to defend, creating a vacuum sphere in his hands that enveloped and extinguished the flames. But he still exclaimed in surprise, "Ah, ah, ah." Seeing David successfully use the vacuum shield, Balthazar said, "Very good, very good." At this moment, the door to the training room was pushed open. Charles addressed the 2 of them, saying, "There's a dining area outside. You can have your meals there. Then, turning to Balthazar, Charles said, Master, I have some personal matters to attend to. It might take some time. I'll get back to studying magic when I return.
Thanks for listening.